eyes, a lot of trainers, I mean, they put so much effort into the World Championships, right? So rerunning that back for their last chance here within this regulation just makes oh so much sense. And for Beck, I mean, with that top 16, looking to improve on that once again is going to be key. And going up against a team too over on Riley's end that we've definitely have gotten to see within the past, especially as of a recent, very recent regional. But I'm curious with these two very accomplished trainers, how this one is going to be stacking up to kick off our day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess we'll see the teams momentarily. And for James here, yeah, we see the Calyrex Shadow Rider paired with Koraidon, a very popular pairing with the ghost type attacks being immune to the normal type and the resisted by dark types, which is being hit super affected by Koraidon. And a supporting cast that I just don't think we see too much, like we see in Storm and Rillaboom paired really well together, of course, but Regieleki, a Pokemon we just don't see in general, but I feel like we mostly see this on Pokemon, on teams that have Calyrex Ice Rider, for example, because the synergy of the offensive Ice type and Electric types is very, very good, but definitely have not seen on this kind of combination. And also Volcarona, able to take advantage of the weather in Sun, being able to reduce its weakness to water while also powering up its fire type attacks.
I love being able to see the Regieleki. I mean, it's not something we've seen the most of within the Scarlet and Violet era, but just so fast, the amount of damage that you can do, or even just that speed control with the Electro Web, I think is just so nice. And I feel like this team is so dangerous because there is those ways of setting up. If you have a passive turn over on Riley's end, we're looking at the Nasty Plot on the Calyrex, we're looking at the Quiver Dance over on this Volcarona, but also you have such powerful, I will hit you right here, right now for so much damage options, where you have to be so careful not to step out of line.
Yeah, absolutely. Like having the bursts in damage from the Koraidon, even the Calyrex Shadow Rider, but also having the option to set up, like you said, with the Volcarona and the Calyrex Effect Shadow Rider. I've always been impressed to see how set up Volcarona can actually do well in this format with two restricted Pokemon. He's saying, I could actually be the star of the show too. But over on Riley's side, we see this team that we recently saw Maddie Morgan pilot to top 16 in Prague, with the only difference between the Ogerpon being a different Pokemon on his team, but relatively similar. We were talking about this backstage because, yeah, this is not a composition that we're really used to seeing. Like, we see Calyrex Shadow Rider, Zamazenta, and Shenpao being paired with each other pretty well, also Raging Bolt. But the Whimsicott just doesn't usually come too often with this pairing, so it's very, very interesting. But the Whimsicott having multiple options for Disruption in the Fake Tears and Encore is very, very cool. And also the substitute on Calyrex Shadow Rider, not something we see very often.
I love Whimsicott, even if it's not the most typical with this exact 5 Pokemon. Being able to lock down a Pokemon with that Encore, I think is just oh so valuable. And that Fake Tears to really be able to make sure your other Pokemon do the most amount of damage can be so dangerous. I'm looking at Qianpao too when we highlight the ways to be able to set up over on Beck's end of the field. Being able to taunt and shut that down is really, really nice. Notably though, for these Pokemon, we do get ways of kind of stopping those spread attacks that maybe Beck would like to go for when you do have the Zamazenta, one of the reasons why this Pokemon is oh so strong. So I'd be really curious to see what these trainers are eyeing up going into this match.
Yeah, I want to say that I think in this Calyrex Shadow Rider mirror, I would say that Riley has a bit more flexibility on his offense, both because he has the immediate screen control and Whimsicott, thanks to the Prankster ability, versus Bick having to rely on Regieleki, which doesn't have that kind of priority. And also, since there is no wide guard over on James's side, so not able to prevent those kind of Calyrex attacks coming out from Riley, but we see the leads come out.
And let's get into it. The first match we get here at the LA Regionals between two powerhouses of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet over on Beck's, and right away we will get to see that Regieleki come to play.
Lead, we have the restricted coming out, but the different pairs with Zamazenta over on Riley's side and the Calyrex on James' side. So immediately there's a lot more offensive pressure from James because both his Pokemon presumably going to be faster than Riley's Pokemon, but there's a bit of a mind game with the wide guard. Do you press the Astro Barrage? Do you go for the setup? There's a lot of options for both players here.
Especially sometimes just the presence of that wide guard is enough to scare trainers off of using those spread damage moves. So knowing that, I'll have to see how Beck can adjust going into this turn. Right away though, when we see the Zamazenta on the field, we're going to see the Terastallization, make sure it's not taking out too much damage. Regieleki, we're not going for the speed control, instead just a Volt Switch. We're not doing the most amount of damage with that Terastallization, but this is going to be a key moment in the back for Beck to be able to switch out, bring another Pokemon to play. And when you're eyeing up these offensive Pokemon on the opposing end, well, this Incineroar makes so much sense. Drop that attack over on the opposing Ogre Pawn. Astro Barrage is next, no wide guard, so we will hit into both of these Pokemon, both being brought down to such low health already. Now, for Riley, it's his turn to go on the offensive. Behemoth Bash first. Not really that much damage, but it's going to be the follow-up that will be important. Woodhammer to do the most amount, but that Intimidate doing so much work.
Yeah, I would say there was a lot of bravery from both players there. Riley saying, okay, I'm okay to take this Astral Barrage. I don't think it'll take me too far behind for me to take these attacks. And basically risking a Protect potentially coming out from the Calyrex since, yeah, it's being under threat by these two Pokemon, especially since the Ogre Pawn Hearthflame has the ability to raise its attack considerably with Terrestrialization. But James saying, yeah, I think thanks to the Intimidate, I have enough defense so that I can get another Astral Barrage off the next turn. And I think James continues to have a lot of pressure here. The Focus Sash still intact on Gialecki.
Incineroar, it just came in, so it did have that option on the Fake Out, but instead just an instant swap out yet again to bring the Regieleki back out. And for Riley, knowing there's the active Fake Out on the board and Pokemon already looking at such low health, it will be a Protect, but only on one. Zamazenta will stay safe, but Astral Barrage will hit into the already low Ogre Pawn on the opposing end. Very easy KO there, so an opportunity now for Riley to bring in a Pokemon a little better fared for this situation.
Yeah, I think Red protecting the Zamazenta makes a lot of sense. You don't want to risk Ride Guard and potentially losing to a Psychic coming out from the Calyrex, especially since this Zamazenta, since it was the one that went for the Wide Guard, it is the only defense for the Calyrex coming out on James's side for Riley's Calyrex. So since he doesn't have the opportunity to Dark Terrestrialization anymore, without any more access to Wide Guard, if Zamazenta were to go down, then yeah, the offense on James' side goes up considerably. So really good play to conserve it there. But with the Whimsicott coming in, Riley having the ability to get better speed control, but it's still not looking great. Like the Calyrex can potentially switch into the Incineroar to take the potential Behemoth Bash. So Riley may have to go for a read here and say, okay, I either going to predict that you're going to Protect or that you're going to switch out into the Incineroar and go for an aggressive play because he seems a little bit behind right now.
And that's the thing. So getting into this turn, it won't actually be a switch though. We will see that speed control come out on Riley's end. Tailwind from Whimsicott to increase the speed.
Wow.
And Behemoth Bash, sure enough, into the Calyrex. So low health. So easy KO there. Now both trainers down to 3 Pokemon. Regieleki with an opportunity to respond. But again, that Terrestrialization, you're not necessarily doing the damage. So it'll take this chance once again to be switching out.
Yeah, I think Riley like correctly saying there, yeah, I don't think you're gonna risk your Incineroar. Like it's so telegraphed for me to go for the Behemoth Bash that I might well go for the read with the Body Press. Like it's very reasonable for me to go for that read and Body Press there, but because I know that Incineroar is so important for you to handle my Calyrex in the end, I don't think you're going to risk it. So yeah, I'm just gonna go for the more straightforward play. And now it seems like the tides have turned. The Incineroar is coming in, but not going to be as effective into the Zamazenta, able to attack with his defensive stats. But we do see the Koraidon come out, not having the speed advantage here, but having the Pokemon advantage, I would say, where it has a pretty good matchup into both these Pokemon, especially with the Zamazenta being so low. So yeah, I think now it's James' turn to sort of fire back and see if he can get through these Tailwind turns.
Yeah, especially too with having just 2 fresh Pokemon on the field. Terrestrialization not yet spent over on Beck's end. Can go ahead and just Terrestrialize right away to be able to reduce that damage. And of course, when you have the Fake Out pressure with the Incineroar, easy way to just kind of shut something down. But then that goes back to it's telegraphed, right? So do you just try and you double into it, or you try and take out the Whimsicott? Well, you can.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see what James goes for here for the Fire type attack, because if you want to, you could go for Flare Blitz and KO basically whatever is going to be there. The Whimsicott definitely going to faint. If there's a Calyrex in the back and it's going to switch in itself, it's still going to faint. So does he say, yeah, I'm going to make sure that I get the speed boost and have the advantage after Tailwind, or say, like, no matter what comes into that slot, I'm going to make sure it's going to get knocked out?
Zamazenta surely Protect with the Fake Out on the board makes so much sense. Moonblast going into the opposing end, just going to target down the Incineroar. Both Pokemon take the hit so well, but we see that James did go for the Flame Charge into the Protect, which means, well, you just got nothing out of that turn, right? Now Riley still has the speed and no Fake Out.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to me, like, you want to stagger when you KO the Whimsicott, because if you KO the Whimsicott this turn, then you have 2 more turns you have to deal with in Tailwind, where you might have to get a double Protect in order to stall it out. So even though it looked bad on paper for James to double attack into a Protect, I think it was pretty good, because now you have the opportunity to stall out the Tailwind, but not with an Encore.
Yeah, Encore into this Rhydon just to make sure it's kind of locked into one, and Incineroar will be targeted down by the Zamazenta. Now for this Koraidon, sure you have the Terastallization, you have the Sun, so it's not going to be the least amount of damage that we've seen. Targeting into this Whimsicott though will still get the KO, but as you were talking about the staggering, well now Riley still has Pokemon he can bring out onto this final turn of Tailwind.
Yeah, that was a really, really clever play by Riley saying, yeah, I see what you're going for. You're trying to stall out the Tailwind, but I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to make sure you KO my Whimsicott this turn so that the Calyrex comes in, and I still have one more turn of Tailwind to stall out. But you can't stall it out now because you can't protect. You're locked into Flame Charge. I guess I'm most curious about, how is this Koraidon trained, right? It's not the Life Orb variant, so it's very possible that it's investing a lot into its bulk. And if that's the case, maybe it can take a body press Astral Barrage. It's a combination of attacks that you're not known to use, but maybe James, is playing some 4D chess with us saying, yeah, I actually saw that you're going to go for the Encore, but that's okay because I'm going to make it through this turn, and it's going to be totally fine.
I mean, we'll have to see, right? Because staring down the Calyrex and the Zamazenta on the opposing end is definitely a dangerous feat. And it's definitely a fate that this Regieleki does not want to subject itself to as Protect comes on out. Calyrex first off with the Astral Barrage. Regieleki stays safe, but again, we're eyeing up this Koraidon and its opportunity to try and make it through this turn. Astral Barrage does so much, though, so much. Maybe counted on a misplay from Riley. Absolutely no chance there. Koraidon goes down, only Regieleki out on the field. And considering that this Calyrex is, well, essentially full health, but just minus the Life Orb, and I mean, the Zamazenta you just don't do damage into, it makes sense that, yeah, we're not seeing the staying power here. I think James knows this at this point.
Yeah, I think even with some luck with critical hits or paralysis from the Thunderbolts, especially with the Terra Dragon over from the Zamazenta's end, it's not going to look good for James. So yeah, it's going to be curtains for him for game one here, but it was such an interesting back and forth. Like, it looked like James had the lead for a lot of it. Like, he got a lot of damage down first turn. He was able to, get the Terra out very early as well, but just with that one Encore play from Riley, made sure that he was not able to stall out the Tailwind and said, oh, actually, I don't have the defensive options like I thought I had. So going to game two, I'm just really excited to see, okay, how does James adjust for this? Like, he can't get too excited from an early lead momentum-wise. Like, he has to really plan out the end game and say, okay, am I going to get disrupted by the Whimsicott again?
I mean, that was also a tough one because it was a Whimsicott that survived past its initial Tailwind turn to be able to go for that too. And that's where James made the play to Flame Charge into the Zamazenta to not allow Riley these two fresh Pokemon on the board, right? So it was kind of tough because you take down the Whimsicott and there's these two big bad restrictors on the opposing end to deal with, or you leave it alone and you get Encored, right? So Riley, again, from the get-go, just put up such a good board state that was really hard for Beck to contend with.
Yeah, I think this reminds us like why Whimsicott is so dangerous. Like, if you take it out too early, then you get the second restricted in and you have 3 turns of Tailwind you have to survive from these really strong Pokemon. But if you don't take it out, then it has Encore pressure to just do exactly what we just saw in game one, where it says, yeah, I'm going to be able to produce a lot of pressure in Tailwind, even if it's just Whimsicott instead of my Calyrex in the back. So there's a really tricky line that James has to go through in order to go through this this offense coming out from Riley's end. And I think maybe the key is going to be Incineroar or Rillaboom or something that can give fake out pressure while the Tailwind's up.
Well, right away, going into this match, a very strong lead coming out from Riley with both restricteds out on the field. Baby. And Beck, okay, well, Calyrex Shadow versus Shadow, but then Incineroar on Beck's end.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that Az want to activate over on Riley's side first over James. Since both these Pokemon are not holding a Focus Sash, it's not really obvious which one will be first, but this is the first time we really see that Riley's is going to be faster, and that gives them such an edge because you're threatening so much damage onto both these Pokemon. With and without Terastallization, you're going to be doing super effective damage with the Astral Barrage or super effective damage with Body Press, and this Incineroar does not have access to Protect. So the one defensive play that James can make that will basically be able to get him through the turn is going to be protecting the Calyrex, Terastallizing the Incineroar to Bug, which is notoriously very good. It's the only Terra type, it's the only type that is able to resist one of the attacks of Zamazenta while being neutral with the other, so of the Calyrex. So that's a defensive play you can make, but then you lose access to Terra on the Calyrex. So I think James has to make a pretty difficult decision this turn.
Especially too, if you use that Terastallization on the Incineroar, well then The Calyrex is in a tough spot on maybe the next turn. And it's also a really tough spot to, well, would I want to then save the Calyrex and go for knockoff? Because there's Terastallization over on the opposing end. So much going on to this very first turn of the match, and not surprised to see a Terastallization come out, but only on one side. Riley, no Terastallization, but not really the damage there thanks to that defensive Terastallization on Beck's end of the field. Now we'll get to see one going on back, and that's called out with a Life Orb and not that Focus Sash. Instead, it's going to be a Calyrex that instantly goes down. A big KO taken so early on within this match. Now there's a Grenade boost, a special attack raise over on this Calyrex. Have to see what the Zamazenta opted for on this turn. It is a body press, but into this Incineroar. So we'll take a piece of piece, but for Riley, that's, well, one restricted gone.
Yeah, what a crazy turn. I mean, both players had defensive options, right? You could protect Calyrex, you could Terastallize Incineroar over on James, and on Riley's end, you could wide guard to, account for this Asteroid Barrage coming out onto your Calyrex that's not Terastallized. But both players saying, yeah, I don't think I need to do that. Like, I'm just going to go for the offensive. And I'm wondering which side really like that trade. Like, on paper, it looks really good for James because he gets to knock out one restricted and trade it for a non-restricted Pokemon in Incineroar, and get an attack boost with the Grenade here. But the problem is that we have a Pokemon that has priority in the Raging Bolt. Luckily, it's not holding the Life Orb that's on the Calyrex. It has the boost energy, so we're not going to have any stacked offenses here with the Sun and the Raging Bolt item. It's just going to be the Sun Photosynthesis boost. But I don't know if the Thunderclap will be enough to knock out the Raging Bolt here, and because, to knock out the Calyrex, and because, the Calyrex is gone on Riley's, and James is the one that has the Pokemon that are both fast than Riley's, so there's a lot of offense coming out here. How does Riley get through this?
That's going to be the thing. The one thing is Riley hasn't used Terastallization. He didn't use it defensively on that first turn. And if you are looking at those offenses going on forward, we do have one extra way to be able to boost the damage of that Thunderclap, and that's with the Terastallization of his own with this Raging Bolt. Being able to add a little bit more to these electric-type moves might be that difference maker as Thunderclap comes on out into this Calyrex Shadow Rider, and it will go down. So now James, already 2 Pokemon gone within this match. This Koraidon has to do the absolute most with Terastallization now already spent. Collision Course is going to be the first way to try and equalize the score into this Raging Bolt, though. Raging Bolt is just so bulky. Body Press in return. I mean, Riley taking that KO. Regieleki comes out, and Regieleki's not going to be doing the most of this.
Yeah, although the Zamazenta is chipped, and Regieleki known to have pretty high offenses thanks to its Transistor ability, so I'm curious, depending on how the Zamazenta is trained, it may or may not be able to take this Thunderbolt, and if it can't, that's going to be really bad news for Riley, because this Koraidon, thanks to his typing, able to resist the Thunderclap, and both thanks to the Focus Sash and the typing of Regieleki going to be the same. So offensively, even though James just lost a Pokemon on the previous turn, he's still keeping it up. So, we see an Electro Web.
Okay, instead, Speed Control coming on out. So that's going to be a speed drop on both of these Pokemon. Raging Bolt's a little slow, but for the Zamazenta, a little bit more impactful. And we're really increasing that speed with the Terastallization, the Flame Charge, and the Sun. You don't need to be doing the most amount of damage to take this KO. So now score is equalized. Beck has a pretty strong speed advantage going on into this. And Body Press into this Koraidon is not quite enough. 8 HP left.
Yeah, that's a big deal because as we see in the back, this is a Pokemon that doesn't have a priority. So the fact that Koraidon actually has even 1 HP is really important here. And I think that was an interesting play from James because I think he expected Riley to have Whimsicott in the back and said, okay, I'm going to both reduce the speed of your Zamazenta and raise my Koraidon speed so that even if you get Tailwind up, I'm going to be able to threaten the knockout onto your Zamazenta. But now it's an Ogerpon. That changes everything. It resists all of the attacks of Regieleki and, will maybe be able to take an attack from the Koraidon. So this is the really important turn here. Can James get the attacking correct? Can Riley get it correct if he's going to protect or what attack he's going to lock into, because he definitely has defensive options now thanks to the Ogerpon being there instead of the Whimsicott.
And Koraidon, just on a sliver of health, is also going to protect through this turn. Just this double protect, so Beck playing it so safe, trying Baron to protect over on Riley's end to be able to get that information, and sure enough, Spiky Shield does come out. So now Riley can't safely go for that over on this next turn. Or everyone's protecting out here.
That's so interesting. I would expect that James was the one who wants to double protect here because he was the one who wants to scout out what is protecting on Riley's end and then be able to double the slot that does protect. So now yeah, the Zamazenta can protect again because it just failed, but Ogerpon, it's going to have a really low chance of being able to successfully protect this turn. So if the double up from James' end is able to knock it out, it's going to be, yeah, curtains because this Zamazenta probably won't be able to win this 2v1 here.
And knowing that the Koraidon failed, okay, first amount of damage into the Ogerpon. I mean, Zamazenta is protected. Now, that's going to be the recoil with that. And two Pokemon still on Riley's end. Thunderbolt, the follow-up into this. Not enough damage into the Ogerpon. So Beck throws everything at this one. Comes up short. Now, Regieleki is on 1 HP with two Pokemon still on Riley's end.
Okay, this is the turn. I want to say this is the turn, but the Zamazenta has a little bit more HP than I expected. Because I was going to say, okay, if you have Electro Web here, you can just go for the Electro Web and potentially throw a Wide Guard. But yeah, the Zamazenta has a little bit too much HP left. So, oh man, wow, that Ogerpon bulk really coming in clutch, being able to live that double up.
Just so bulky, and now with Regieleki on just that 1 HP, Body Press is all it's going to take to put Riley in that win 2-0 to be kicking off the LA Regional Championships.
Wow, that was like a masterclass of a best of three, also having a lot of exciting teams.
Going on though, as you said, like, I mean, this restricted pairing just makes so much sense for Montana. But when we saw him get that top 4, it was a Dragonite as opposed to that Tornadus. And we got to see that Dragonite at that Orlando Regional Championships too. So very, very recent change, and actually changes quite a lot on this team.
Yeah, I think the Tornadus is pretty interesting, having more options for speed control. Before it was basically just entirely on the Qianpao with the Icy Wind. So taking that pressure off the Qianpao and having multiple options for speed control. And also having a better matchup into the Smeargle, Calyrex Shadow Rider, Zamazenta Mirror, where, yeah, before I think sometimes you might have to make some pretty good reads, use your Amoonguss more cleverly, but yeah, with the Tornadus having access to that taunt, you can shut down both the opposing Tornadus, Tailwind, as well as their Smeargle as well. So I think it's a pretty interesting change from Montana, and goes to show that he's definitely thinking about the team and the meta a lot more, even after having had so much success with something similar at the World Championships.
And going from something that was like a choice band Dragonite to that Tornadus is really prioritizing the other damage options on this team. But if we want to talk about switch-ups, well, Behzad has definitely switched it all up. I mean, you talk about that restricted pairing with Montana. I thought of Behzad and I think of Lunala. That is what he won the Vancouver Regional Championships with in that single restricted format. And at the World Championships, we got to see a run back with it. But now, completely switching it up. It's going to be everyone's second favorite Sunsetter, the Groudon, to really try and pack a punch. And I mean, there's a reason why people do play it, because those ground type moves, that Precipice Blades, can do so much and hit super effective into so many things in this format.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to see this team from Behzad, because it goes against all of my fundamentals of team building, where I say, okay, if I'm playing double restricted, I want one special type attacker, one physical type attacker, and I want them to complement each other in terms of offenses and typing. So this actually goes against both of them, because Zamazenta and Groudon are both physical type attackers, and I just don't really see that many immediate synergies between, you know, ground type and fire type attacks versus fighting type attacks. Like, Zamazenta is often paired with Calyrex Shadow Rider, because for the Pokemon it can't hit like the ghost types, then the Calyrex can hit for super effective. So that's really disorienting to me. But I also want to point out this Golden Go. We don't see Golden Go that often in this regulation, because it's just not as powerful as it is in the other lower power formats, where you're just not relying on your unrestricted Pokemon to do damage like Golden Go. But it actually might be matching up pretty well here into Montana's team, because if you can, yeah, imprison the Zamazenta, and you have your own wide guard support, you can wall Calyrex Shadow Rider, Zamazenta, Tornadus, Amoonguss thanks to its typing, thanks to its ability, and then Qianpao can only hit it with Sucker Punch. So it's actually pretty interesting. I wouldn't count it out as something that gets brought here. I personally don't really see what matchups it comes into specifically, but if there were to be one, it would be this one, in my opinion.
Definitely adds an extra little layer to all the complexities within this match, which will be really interesting to see how then going into Montana's team, Behzad wants to approach it, especially too when it is something a smidge more that we don't quite see so often, right? We don't really see Groudon, we don't necessarily see this 6, we don't really see Golden Go as much in this format. Well, then I'm really counting on Behzad to kind of have a really strong understanding of the metagame and how this team in particular can not just go up against it, but really how to counter it in a way that should put him in advantage.
Yeah, I mean, look at this matchup. It's a little bit awkward for Montana, I think, because the Zamazenta, if it gets imprisoned first, especially before it attacks, it's just going to become a completely sitting duck, only having access to Protect as a move that it can click in front of the imprisoned Zamazenta on Behzad's side. And yeah, I don't know on the other hand though that the Zamazenta on Montana's side is even that well positioned into Behzad's team anyways. Like there's not that many Pokemon that you want to hit with, you know, fighting type attacks other than like maybe the Roaring Moon. And Raging Bolt has like a pretty good advantage into that. So I don't even know if Montana feels the pressure of bringing the Zamazenta to begin with. So it could be a very easy like, so I don't want to say easy because yeah, it's very difficult to manage using not using one of your restricted Pokemon, but definitely can come up with a game plan where you don't involve Zamazenta here.
What I'm looking at in this match, something we didn't necessarily talk about in the team preview, was kind of the other things Groudon can do for Behzad's team and being able to support. I'm looking particularly at that Flutter Mane and that Roaring Moon, being able to set them up. Sure, we have the double physical attackers for the restricted Pokemon, but when you have that Golden Go and that Flutter Mane to really be able to dish out damage on that special attacking end of things, I think that is going to be something that could be really, really big. Flutter Mane, I mean, it has been a force to be reckoned with for a reason. And for something like that Roaring Moon, it's the way to be able to not just get your own speed on the end with a Tailwind, but try and kind of limit a couple of options either. And it's one of those Pokemon that can pack a punch on a really good day. So I'm kind of intrigued about all of this as a whole. I feel like it'll be really interesting to see and kind of difficult for what forward you want to prioritize, because I kind of feel like with those Sun teams, it's like, well, you have your Sun Pokemon, then the Pokemon that take advantage of the Sun.
Right.
Well, then where do you go from there? Because you can only really bring one more past that, right?
Yeah.
But that would be kind of my eye going into this.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing the item on the Roaring Moon. I realized as you were bringing this point up because it has the booster energy, which means that the Roaring Moon wants to be able to have that boost, whether it's in the attack or in the speed, even when the Sun's not out. And that signals to me, okay, maybe this is a check into Kyogre teams where even if the Sun goes down, I can still have my Roaring Moon to be fast, to be able to set up Tailwinds first before my opponent. So yeah, I'm not sure if it's a Pokemon that you want to bring here then necessarily, but it is a Pokemon that has a pretty good matchup into Calyrex Shadow Rider, and if you don't have to worry about Zamazenta because you're imprisoning it, then it has a pretty good, yeah, a toolkit for giving you speed control there. So it feels like Behzad has a lot more flexibility just thanks to that Imprison Zamazenta, but having Imprison means that you also have a big opportunity cost, right? You don't have access to your own Protect. So the Zamazenta, one of your restricted Pokemon, you can't treat it as delicately as you would in other teams because you don't have the ability to protect itself. So I'm sure Behzad is really used to this dynamic and can position really well so that yeah, you don't have to rely on Protect to have your Zamazenta in good position. But it's also interesting because Zamazenta is a Pokemon where position really matters, right? Because if you're out of position, you want to retreat, you lose access to your defense boost. So I'm excited to see Behzad's mastery of this kind of concept, which seems really difficult to use on paper, and seeing in response how good Montana is to adapt because he just knows Calyrex Shadow Rider so well.
And don't worry, trainers, we're almost into the match. We're just really jamming out to this pre-battle music that we have going on, so we had to extend it as long as possible, really get hype for this matchup ahead of us. But that gives us an extra moment to theorize a little bit, maybe talk about leads that we can see coming out, because we talked again about all these different options that Behzad had to be able to counter. So then looking at Montana's end of things, how much does that disrupt his own game plan and how you maybe want to lead these Pokemon to maybe not fall into one of those traps?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the Chenpau's pretty well positioned. I think the only Pokemon you really want to worry too much about is the Zamazenta, since you can't get rid of it too easily. But because you have access to Icy Wind, you can do something like Icy Wind plus even like a Draco Meteor into the opposing Ogerpon, which you don't want to face down as a Chenpau generally. So the Chenpau looks generally pretty good, having access to a lot of control. I think, yeah, especially if the Zamazenta is not led, you have opportunities to get one Ruination off, one Icy Wind off. So I can see that being in the lead. I think I'm curious about is, does Montana decide to bring the Calyrex Shadow Rider in the front or in the back? Because with the positioning on Zamazenta facing down the Imprison, I think Montana's going to really want to rely a lot on the Calyrex, and I think the game plan changes a lot depending on if it's led in the lead or if it's in the back.
And then what about over on Behzad's end? Because again, you talked about all these different things that the Zamazenta really shuts down and just how well positioned it is into the team. So is that something you just want to lead right away, just kind of have it stick around the field for as long as possible? Or is it kind of like burst through the initial leads with some offense and then have that as like the standalone pillar in the back?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you can go for both options because it's not very easy for Montana to get through the Zamazenta, especially if Behzad tries to go for a Terra Dark. You're going to resist all the attacks coming out from the Calyrex, and then you're also not going to take any damage from the Zamazenta if you can get that Imprison up first. So you can definitely use it as a Pokemon that Montana has to invest a lot of resources to get through, and then close out with the Groudon in the back. But Behzad can also say, okay, I'm going to lead my Flutter Mane and Groudon, do a ton of damage. You don't have that many Pokemon that can hit my actually, you don't have any Pokemon that can hit my Groudon for super effective other than the Qianpao. So I think Montana will also have to invest a lot of resources to get through the Groudon, especially if he doesn't bring the Zamazenta. You won't have any options to prevent the Precipice Blades from coming out. So again, it really feels like Behzad has a lot more flexibility in his game plans, and Montana might have to think a little bit about, what is Behzad's game plan going to be, and what is my lead and counter to that.
All right, one more loop at the song, guys, until we head into this match, probably. But I'll be really intrigued to see how this one plays out. I think going into the match, what I'm really eyeing up again is just the experience that Montana has, not just within this regulation, but with this current iteration of the team. Whereas for Behzad, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, gamers, but I believe we did not get to see him at Orlando. So this will be the first regulation eye since its return that we've gotten to see him. And again, when we know him as this Lunala player that was able to get such a great accomplishment, I mean, winning a regional with it, to then go into something like this Groudon and this Zamazenta is just such a pivot that I'm really, really intrigued to see just kind of how it matches up. Obviously, he is such an accomplished player. He was using the Lunala before people really started understanding the prowess of that Pokemon. And is somebody that is really good at kind of digging deep and recognizing the skills of these Pokemon, right? Which is where I'm really, really eyeing up, like, yeah, this could be a really, really good match. But that's where my concern goes into this in comparison to someone who did top 4 worlds.
Yeah, I mean, I love the point that you brought up because, yeah, this is a very unconventional team, but as you just pointed out, like he's used to using unconventional Pokemon, right? Using Lunala before it was good, winning a regional with it. So I have a lot of faith that Behzad has thought a lot about this team because you can't not be intentional with this team and do well with it, right? It's like this team has very specific plays you need to make because there's some, on the very surface, there are some gaps that you can't just play in a standard way. So I think part of what's going to be exciting for me to watch this match, on top of just being a good match, is how does this team get played? Because it's not very apparent to me from the surface. But it sounds like we're getting right into it, so I'm really, really excited. What are the leads going to be between these top players?
Oh, we finally get to get into the match. Thanks again for holding on, everyone. Montana Mont going up against Behzad Muntasir, 2 regional championships within Scarlet Violet era, but okay, what a lead coming out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, Montana, like, one way you can get through Imprison is to Tailwind first so that you can get one big body press off before the Imprison comes out on from Behzad's end. So this lead from Montana maybe wanting to check that, but Behzad coming with a completely different plan, saying, yeah, I might just have the Zamazenta to the back, and I'm going to make you burn a lot of resources on my Flutter Mane and Groudon, because, I mean, Groudon's just so well positioned here. It can threaten one-hit knockout onto the Tornadus, especially if it has Terra available to it. And the Flutter Mane also going to be able to get some good speed control up in counter to Tornadus' speed control. So I'm curious to see how does Montana get through this offense on Behzad's side, because it's pretty impressive.
Especially, too, you talked about the burning of resources on the Flutter Mane. That's because we do see the Focus Sash variety, whereas Montana, Focus Sash is on a Pokemon that is not on the field. So sure, Montana, Tailwind on this turn coming out from the Tornadus will be able to set up the Sun, but that is just not the damage you want into that Groudon. Tornadus gets taken down to half. Fire Punch coming out, so kind of middle ground play, but you're not taking KOs. You're not necessarily taking the most damage, and that's going to be a turn of Tailwind where you don't get a free swap into anything else.
Yeah, and the Fire Punch is interesting because it's a move that typically is not nearly as strong as the Heat Crash, being able to hit 120 base power. But against Pokemon like Zamazenta, precisely, you want that Fire Punch because Zamazenta is so heavy, you're not going to get too much damage from that Heat Crash.
Going into this, Focus Sash coming up as Flutter Mane will get taken down to 1 HP after the Zamazenta attack. Moonblast into the Zamazenta, though, will bring it down to about a third. But again, Flutter Mane on 1. Bleak Wind will double connect, so Flutter Mane will go down. Groudon now on about a third of its HP, doesn't have an opportunity to respawn. Will be a Fire Punch again or a Heat Crash into the Tornadus. Fire Punch, and it will be enough damage. I thought it could be close, but the double up is enough to go 1-for-1 on this turn.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting for me to see Behzad like really go down onto the Zamazenta specifically, because you would expect that the Zamazenta's in the back, and yeah, you would have the ability to imprison it later, but maybe saying, okay, because the speed control advantage is on Montana's end right now, I don't want to rely on my Zamazenta being able to get imprisoned off, and yeah, we see the Zamazenta come out here, so it makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, getting rid of the Zamazenta, pretty good decision, because now if you're going to terrestrialize your Zamazenta, you're going to resist both attacks from this Calyrex, and because of its bulk, going to shrug off Tornadus's attack and threaten a knockout in return. So even though it doesn't look so good, you know, losing a Pokemon and still having to fight through 2 more turns of Tailwind, I think Behzad's positioned Zamazenta really, really well.
Well, especially too, Terrestrialization, like as you called out, that Terrestrialization and a Wide Guard, the Tornadus with a Sharp Beak, you're trying to look for these Bleak Winds to do some damage, right?
Yeah.
But if we see a Wide Guard on the opposing end, there's not an attacking move that this Tornadus can really opt into. And of course, the Calyrex just gets completely shut down. So pivot out, Qianpao will hit the field instead. And of course, that's going to weaken the defense, which will matter a little bit more on that next turn. A switch for a switch, though. Groudon also is going to be leaving the field. Zamazenta sticks around, and Roaring Moon is going to be coming out.
Yeah, if we were to see any kind of Terrestrialization come out from Behzad's end, then he's positioned 2 Pokemon really, really well in front of the Calyrex, both resisting both of its super strong attacks. And yeah, we see the Qianpao come in, but because this Qianpao is not the typical Focus Sash Qianpao that's on the Calyrex, it doesn't have things like Sacred Sword to be able to get super effective damage onto these dark types. So yeah, really relying a lot on this Calyrex to do damage, but typing-wise, it's just not looking good for Montana.
It really isn't. The Zamazenta has been set up for success here. Heavy Slam, it will just go into a Protect, so nothing's done this time around. But for Montana, that's another turn of the speed kind of just gone. And again, you're now in this position where the Zamazenta does so well into these Pokemon. Can't really get hit by too much.
Yeah, one thing I'm curious to see is how this Qianpao is trained. Because of the Assault Vest, you'd expect it to be pretty bulky, but how bulky is it, especially on the physical side here? Because if it were to Terrestrialize, could it take 2 Heavy Slams from the Zamazenta? Because I think you want to see this Qianpao survive as long as possible so you can get as many Ruinations down and then slowly be able to, yeah, get those KOs onto these Dark-type Pokemon. And yeah, with the Calyrex having the Focus Sash means you're not immediately threatened by the Dark-type types coming out from the Roaring Moon. So Montana definitely has tools. I think he just has to be very, very surgical with how he uses it, because if he doesn't get damage down on one turn where he really needs to, that could just spell disaster.
I mean, for one of those tools will be Terrestrialization, but instead on the Calyrex Shadow Rider, when we're looking at, well, the only way to be hitting these Pokemon is with an Astral Barrage, anything to just try and do a little bit more and more damage coming on out. Roaring Moon with the Protect won't take any, but again, highlighting the defensive Terrestrialization over the opposing end, and even just how it would be anyways, to see how much this is going to do.
Wow.
Nothing, even with that Terrestrialization. Ice Spinner, it does target into the Roaring Moon, so again, Behzad, such a strong position, and that Heavy Slam, talked about how, you know, with Terrestrialization, maybe it can make through 2, but without, well, that's just a clean one-hit KO.
Yeah, really good playing from Behzad's end, identifying, okay, the only Pokemon you can get super effective damage on this turn is my Roaring Moon, and because your Qianpao doesn't have Protect, I'm either going to force you to Terrestrialize your Qianpao, in which case your Calyrex is not going to do that much damage anymore, or I'm just going to knock it out this turn with my Heavy Slam, and now my Roaring Moon is just not going to be threatened. And not to mention that because Zamazenta does have Wide Guard on Behzad's end, Wide Guard just means that Calyrex can't do any more damage for the rest of this game if Behzad so chooses, especially with the Tornadus only having access to spread moves as well. I think this is actually checkmate. I was realizing as I was saying it, but yeah, Montana only has spread type attacks that can hit dark types, and yeah, if Behzad just keeps clicking Wide Guard, yeah, there's no more damage that Montana can do.
Yep, there we go. That's checkmate. Wide Guard comes on out. Protect won't do anything. This Calyrex Shadow Rider is about to do a whole lot of nothing as well. So writing on the wall, it's just going to be whether we want to click the forfeit button next turn or let Behzad go ahead and knock out the Pokemon. But I mean, looking back again, just the positioning from the Zamazenta, the Terrestrialization that was so well spent, and choice of moves here, it was just such a tough position. I mean, early on, it was just so well played. Sun goes. We still get a booster energy photosynthesis for this Roaring Moon anyways, so you still get to maintain that speed. And yeah, clicking the button, but I mean, at one point you'd have to attack, and that would be the kind of one thing coming out from Behzad, but still.
Yeah, I think what's really cool about the Zamazenta, the dark typing, really unintuitive because you don't get rid of your fighting type weakness, but when you position it like this, it means that you're not only taking no damage from this Calyrex, but it also means that you're not going to get taunted by something like Prankster Taunt that could come out from this Tornadus, and that is one way that Montana could get back into the game, is taunting the Zamazenta as Calyrex protects, and then next turn you get the opportunity to get your spread type damage out. but that's not even an option because dark types are immune to pranksters. So yeah, really, really interesting choice from Behzad to have the dark typing, but paying off in spades in this matchup, as you can tell. Yeah, like it's in a position where like as long as Behzad doesn't misplay, there's just no way Montana could win.
Yeah, as long as you click the right buttons and don't have the most insane controller drift of your life, which I think Montana recognizes. That's going to be the match forfeited. And this team that we had highlighted as being a little bit more unconventional in comparison with the current metagame, a dominant victory in that game 1.
Yeah, you can tell that it's very intentionally built to beat the mirror matchup here. I guess I can't say mirror matchup because of Groudon over on Behzad's end, but tried to beat the Calyrex, Shadow Rider, Zamazenta compositions because, yeah, that Zamazenta is just so well positioned. If you can get the speed control up, have the Imprison active, or knock out the Zamazenta as we just saw, there's just such little tools that Montana has to get through it. So that's why it made a lot of sense to me that Behzad had it in the back. And yeah, as we see here, getting rid of the Zamazenta early on so that the Terra Dark Zamazenta doesn't even have to think about Imprison. It can just start heavy slamming, body pressing, getting KO after KO.
And I feel like a lot of the time we see the Zamazenta, it is let out because you get that defense raise, you can kind of stick around, etc., right? But Behzad instead having so much more of an aggressive lead, bursting down these options, and then again, as you called out, Montana had to expend these resources that just, I mean, Behzad could just run away with that end game. So for Montana, because we need to see the switch up for Montana here, what do you kind of anticipate heading into this game number 2 to put it on a little bit more of a level playing field?
Yeah, I think the Amoonguss is looking pretty good over on Montana's end, like especially if he's willing to commit the Terra, which I think he's okay to. These Calyrex Shadow Rider teams with Focus Sash on them, one of the benefits is that you don't have as much pressure to Terrasilize the Calyrex because it's going to survive one hit anyways. Being able to Terrasilize the Amoonguss means that the water typing really hard to punish over from Behzad's end. The only one would be the Cornerstone Ogre Pawn. And because he didn't bring it this turn, Montana might say, okay, I don't think that's part of his plan, so I'm going to bring my Amoonguss. And yeah, it's going to do great into the leads of Groudon and Flutter Mane. Even if you were to lead Zamazenta this time, for example, you're able to absorb those fighting type attacks with resistance. And I think the Amoonguss looks really good, but you know, Behzad's a regional champion, definitely not a first timer into this best of 3 matchup. Is he going to mix it up and bring something like the Ogre Pawn?
Ooh, that would be interesting too, because you don't always expect the switch ups, but we will get a drastic change around coming out from Behzad, but not so much from Montana heading into this game number 2.
Yeah, I think maybe this is the lead that Montana wanted to see in game 1 because you have 2 Pokemon on Behzad's end that is weak to body press, and being such a strong attack, certainly going to knock out that Roaring Moon and do a ton of damage to the Zamazenta. But I think the question now becomes, is it worth it for Montana to go for that? Because if you go for Tailwind first and then you body press, yeah, you get a lot of damage on that one turn, but if you're getting imprisoned after that, then you just lose like so much momentum. And you can go for the taunt onto the Zamazenta, but if it's going to Terra Dark, it just doesn't, it's not going to do anything. So I think this is a really important turn for Behzad to figure out, okay, how much damage can I mitigate in this one turn before getting the Imprison? Because as soon as the Imprison goes up, you're able to wide guard the Tornadus, and you're not going to take much damage from the Zamazenta anymore.
That's the tough part too, especially too with how well posed body press is into these Pokemon, and using the Terrasalization that early feels like a little bit of a rough one, but having the double weakness, we'll see a little bit of a switch out, and Golden Go is coming out to play. So if it is something like a body press into that slot, well, it is not going to do anything. Terrasalization, sure enough, will come out onto the field for the Zamazenta into the Dark type. So, as said, still going to be weak, that we're inevitable with this Terrasalization. But if it is something like the Taunt to try and shut it down, it's not going to do anything. Instead, it will just be the Tailwind to, again, make sure the Zamazenta on Montana's end of the field is going a little bit faster. And body press into the other end just does so much damage. But that'll be the only time it can do that much damage, as it now is going to be shut off with Imprison coming out.
Yeah, what a play from Behzad. I mean, Montana got the turn right, so to speak, by going for the body press into the Zamazenta instead of the Golden Go, where there have been 0 damage. But now Behzad, it's just looking incredible for Behzad here. Golden Go resisting Tornadus attack, not to mention they're going to take 0 damage if there's going to be a wide guard, as we see Zamazenta trying to go for that body press, but just not going to happen. Oh, not the heavy slam either. And yeah, wow, like
can't click that one either, buddy.
Montana's saying, okay, are you sure this open team sheet's correct? Can I just make sure just in case? And yeah, wow, this Behzad's Golden Go looking incredible. Yeah, Montana forced to switch out here to have a better matchup into this Golden Go, but that gives it a free turn to attack or go for the nasty plot. And yeah, we see the Raging Bolt come out. Luckily, it's in that Tailwind, so let's see how Behzad reacts on this turn. Can he get damage onto this Raging Bolt?
Ooh, instead going for the wide guard, considering there is, of course, that threat of something like that Bleak Wind Storm coming out. But Shadow Ball Golden Go is on the field, and that's a lot of damage into the Raging Bolt on the opposing end.
Yeah, so good turn from Behzad in terms of getting damage onto the Bolt, but getting it wrong with the wide guard, not wanting to take that Bleak Wind Storm. And now it's a little bit back onto Montana. You have 2 more turns of Tailwind left, and you have Raging Bolt that has a pretty good matchup to both those Pokemon. The Zamazenta can't protect. The problem is, can this Golden Go set up even more and give even more damage out onto this Raging Bolt that is, yeah, positioned really, really well right now. The only other issue for Behzad, though, is that as soon as the Zamazenta goes down, that Calyrex is looking really, really good, right? Because the translations are already coming on Zamazenta. Golden Go doesn't have that option anymore, and you lose wide guard. So Behzad has to be really, really careful what he does this turn.
Going into this one, though, as called out, the Protect was already used. The other 3 moves can't be clicked at all. So instead of going for the gamble, a little bit of a switcheroo instead. And of course, into the Calyrex, if it is a body press, well, of course, it won't do anything. Zamazenta's also going to retreat over on Behzad's end. You had called out how strong it would be for Montana to get rid of it. So Behzad's recognizing that and will switch out. Groudon coming out to play is going to be setting up that Sun, which actually activates the photosynthesis and the special attack over onto Montana's Raging Bolt. Something that won't come into play this time around, though, as Montana is forced again on the defensive. And Golden Go, well, you have that option to protect on this next turn, which could be big, because again, Montana was the one that had the speed, and he's had to spend all of his Tailwind turns kind of just protecting around and pivoting.
Yeah, like excellent turn from Montana's end, because now you have this Calyrex Shadow that can just wreak havoc, right? Like you have this Astral Barrage. You can't protect on the Groudon. The Golden Go typing can't be changed anymore thanks to the Terra being on the Zamazenta, and the Raging Bolt being boosted even further thanks to the photosynthesis boost. So, you know, it looked really bleak in the first turn, but like just these 2 important turns from Montana, completely switching the matchup on its head, and now it's going to become the Calyrex show.
Yeah, and the thing that's tough about this Calyrex Shadow Rider is this is where the Focus Sash is into play too. So again, it's going to be a Pokemon that can deal so much damage on this turn and can't be taken down because this Golden Go is just not going to make it by, right? Terastallization as well. It was on the Calyrex Shadow in that first game to try and do a little bit more of damage. Now we'll see it in the second game to do the most, as this is going to pack a punch onto Behzad's current board state. Gonna try and alleviate that pressure a little bit, though. Golden Go can't make it through. It is forced to protect. Groudon does have the Assault Vest, but this will still do a good amount of damage into it. And again, with that Focus Sash, won't be able to OHKO it in return. Have to see exactly how much it's going to do. Okay, so it won't be a 2-hit. Heat Crash coming on out will bring it right almost down to Focus Sash. 3 HP, essentially the same.
Yeah, really heads up play from Behzad there, saying, okay, I know you're not going to just sacrifice your Raging Bolt, so I'm not going to go for the inaccurate Precipice Blades. You're going to cover that with the Tornado Switch. So I'm going to go for something much more reliable with the Heat Crash, make sure that the Sash is definitely going to be gone on the Calyrex. But yeah, it's still looking really, really strong for Montana. No priority moves on Behzad's end, as you can see here. So even though Calyrex has such low HP, with the speed control on his end, it's going to be pretty difficult to get a knockout this turn. One thing that Montana does have to be careful about is that the Zamazenta is still in the back, and you have 2 Pokemon that can get a lot of spread damage out. So positioning still going to be important for Montana.
Where this could also get weird too, we saw how much damage this did last time, and again, the Groudon won't be taken down, and if Bleak Wind misses, which it does, the Groudon gets to stick around, so Groudon gets the opportunity to attack one more time, and will take the Calyrex down.
Yeah, big miss over for Bleak Wind. That's the... Yeah, Bleak Wind takes, Bleak Wind gives, but yeah, it's going to be the former this time. And the Calyrex goes down, but Zamazenta is still looking pretty good position-wise. You have Terra Dark, Zamazenta in the back, where, yeah, you still have access to speed control to be able to attack before it imprisons. And the ground is so low that, yeah, the super effective fire and ground type attacks are much less of a threat because you can safely attack into that slot this turn while you still have the Tailwind up, and there's no protect on the Groudon. So, yeah, even though it didn't look so great for that one turn for Montana, I think the momentum's still definitely in his favor.
I mean, yeah, the health bars of these Pokemon are just so strong, and as you called out, like, yeah, nothing really hits the Zamazenta in the way that would really need to about at this point. So still set up pretty strong. Even if the last turn you would have loved to be able to get that KO, that was more of a nail in the coffin as opposed to the still extremely strong board state that Montana has now.
Yeah, I think one thing that Montana has to be really careful for is this Golden Go in the back, because you lost the one big tool that you have into the Ghost type Golden Go. And yeah, as you can see here, it's a perfect pivot right here because you're going to be immune to the fighting type attacks coming out from Zamazenta and resist the Bleak Wind Storms. So yeah, this turn, the body press is also going to the Golden Go. Wow, so big turn for Behzad. He crashed onto the Tornadus. Oh, so close to a KO. Wow, and now this Golden Go looking incredible. No Raging Bolt in sight, which is the one Pokemon left on Montana's end that has a good matchup into it. So yeah, it didn't look so good in those previous turns, but as soon as we saw the Golden Go come in at full health still, not taking the Astral Barrage is big game plan for Behzad.
I mean, that's the one thing for Montana with both of the Pokemon being so low and just looking at, well, the damage the Groudon's going to do in comparison to what this Roaring Moon's do. You kind of have to pick and choose, right? But getting that wrong, the body press into the Pokemon it can't affect is a really rough one, and kind of leaving the door open for a little bit of shenanigans going on forward. We body pressed this time into the Groudon. I mean, so low health. Just take care of it. Get closer to trying to wrap this game up. But I'm going to be curious with what and how much this Golden Go to do. Another Bleak Wind miss, though. You really wanted to start getting that damage. And it's going to be a Golden Go. Behzad's putting everything on this Pokemon. Nasty plot to make sure it does the most amount of damage next turn.
Yeah, I think the one thing that now Behzad wants to be really conscious of is having the speed advantage or having the health advantage to the Raging Bolt by the time it comes in. Because right now, it's not going to take that much damage, but what Montana can do is make sure that Tailwind is still up by the time the Raging Bolt comes in, or just making sure that the Raging Bolt is so low that you don't need speed control by the time the Raging Bolt comes in. You can just go for a Thunderclap. So those are the two things that Behzad has to be really mindful of. And I think he does have flexibility because he has the Roaring Moon right here that has the ability to threaten going for a Tailwind. So I think the toolkit is on Behzad's side to have that Golden Go sweep come out in the end. He just has to execute and make sure that, yeah, either the speed advantage doesn't go his way or that the health advantage doesn't go his way. Just needs to pick one of those two.
And this is where things can get quite interesting as well, right? Because if you know, well, from Montana, you do not want this Roaring Moon to get this Tailwind up to be able to match that speed and then have the advantage when 2 turns. Well, then you have to go after the Roaring Moon, right? But then also that's kind of leaving this +2 Golden Go by itself and lonesome. And if you do try and target down this Pokemon, well, all of a sudden the Protect could be huge. Zamazenta instead, though, is going to start trying to chip some damage into this Golden Go, and a Bleak Wind Storm is the next one. Again, Roaring Moon is going to be able to stay safe past this, and we finally will get a connect. Still not very effective. Golden Go can, that was even a critical hit. Golden Go can go on the offensive. Make it rain, +2 into these Pokemon. Torn goes down, and Montana, only 2 Pokemon left in this match, and 1 more turn of that speed advantage.
Yeah, that was a pretty big turn for Montana, though, because especially with the Life Orb tick, yeah, even a Heavy Slam might be able to KO this Golden Go now, and especially with the Thunderclap, yeah, you can lose a speed advantage and stall out the Tailwind, but then you're still going to, you only have 1 more turn of Tailwind left, but you just might not need it anymore. So with the Roaring Moon having just protected, that's going to be vulnerable as well. So that 1 turn might have changed everything. If that Bleak Wind had not connected, then with the Raging Bull not having access to Terra, may not have gone that knockout with Thunderclap. So wow, yeah, I feel like the tables have completely turned. I wonder if Behzad has a way out.
We're just making up for the missed Bleak Wind Storm on the previous turn. We're trying to equalize things here, right? A miss 1 turn, the critical hit the next is called out. Montana still has that speed and ways to try and check into these very low health Pokemon. So keeping that in mind, Golden Go will protect. Body press into the Roaring Moon, again, at super effective, will be enough for a KO. Another critical hit coming by. Crit mattered. But now Behzad also down to his final 2 Pokemon.
Yeah, so then there's one last mind game this turn, which is, okay, does the Golden go for a double protect? Because if it goes for a double protect, regardless of if it succeeds or not, the Thunderclap will fail. So in that case, the Golden would be able to survive, and then maybe the Zamazenta will be able to knock out the Raging Bolt before it can knock out the Golden Go. But yeah, also with the Zamazenta on Behzad's end, being threatened by the Zamazenta on Montana's end, could go for the body press and get that knockout too. So Yeah, it's not looking good for Behzad. I think if Montana plays this well this turn, it might be locked up for a game 3 in this match.
Oh, it's a tricky one though, because we know all the shenanigans that can happen if you get the call wrong, or if we do see this protect come out of 1 and 3 and Montana plays into that protect, things can start to go a little sideways. And is this where we eye up? I mean, the one thing with things like those priority moves and offering that thunderclap is, well, do I go for a different move in anticipation that they won't click an attacking move? In prison, coming out from Behzad, though, is the one thing we didn't quite talk about, and that is going to lock it down. No thunderclap is also there, so Shadow Ball will take care of the Raging Bolt. So low health on that Golden Go, but no priority move means no chance of survival. A game that looked so strong in Montana's favor just a few turns ago completely turns on his head, and that is going to be Behzad Muntazir to take the set 2-0. What?
And interesting because it's also a mixed set.
It is.
It's got Shadow Sneak and Poltergeist, which are physical attacks, but it also has Draco Meteor, which is a special attack.
Yeah, super interesting. That Draco Meteor will allow you to burst down opposing dragon types like Koraidon or Miraidon. And normally with Draco Meteor, it feels kind of bad because then you kind of feel like you need to switch out to get rid of that special attack drop. But Giratina's like, okay, I'll Draco, I'll KO a big dragon type, and I can still just use my most powerful attack basically in Poltergeist and keep spamming it. And so Giratina's interesting, of course, because it can completely wall something like Zamazenta, which of course is one of the more popular picks in this format. And then I normally see Giratina when used paired with Zamazenta. It's actually going to be Zacian here as its partner. This is a Swords Dance set as well, so you can see there's double fake out on this team with Grimmsnarl. There's, you know, disruption with Thunderwave and Light Screen as well, so you can protect the Zacian, and once it gets the Swords Dance off, this Pokemon can be pretty annoying to deal with.
Yeah, I also like that we've got double ground types. Landorus Incarnate, of course, that's going to naturally be a ground type there with Earth Power and Sancier Storm, but Rillaboom's got the tech move of high horsepower just in case you can't get that Landorus into the right position. And of course, an Urshifu. We're going to have an Urshifu on both sides, but for Brandon, it's the Rapid Strike variant. So you're going to have Searching Strikes, Close Combat. You're also going to have Coaching on a Choice Scarf set.
Yeah, I think Coaching is really interesting because what it means is you can lead Urshifu with Zacian or Giratina and immediately give your restricted Pokemon a boost. And both of these Pokemon already hit for pretty good damage. Imagine getting it to +1, then the Pokemon can follow up and just get a +1 Poltergeist, +1 Behemoth Blade, for example. So a lot of different combos from Brandon's end. I imagine, like, for example, leading one of the fake out users in Rillaboom or Grimmsnarl paired with Zacian is pretty strong. Urshifu can be led with either of the restricted Pokemon. And on Luke's end, we've got Hard Trick Room.
This is going to be exactly what you expect. Luke's name of the game is going to be getting that Trick Room set up and then getting those sweeper Pokemon in to take advantage of that speed control. So you've got Calyrex Ice Rider and Lunala, as well as Indeedee Female, that are all going to provide an avenue to get this Trick Room activated.
Absolutely. And one thing that's interesting about teams like this is you also have Urshifu, which normally is a pretty fast Pokemon, actually utilized under Trick Room. So it's normally going to be as low speed as possible to try to be the fastest Pokemon or one of the fastest Pokemon under Trick Room. And so with teams like this, the idea is you can lead Smeargle with any of the 2 restricteds normally, pressure with Fake Out into Trick Room, or just an immediate deck rate. Indeedee, of course, can also provide further support. This Indeedee notably has Heal Pulse as well. That's not a move that we see that frequently, so can potentially, for example, heal up Calyrex, Ice Rider, and Lunala back to full HP. So Smeargle is one Pokemon I have my eyes out on this matchup because it can be so disruptive. Getting a Spore off into Zacian or Giratina can give you a big advantage. And then Power Meteor Beam, immensely powerful, especially into the Giratina, which I imagine Brandon will want to bring.
And then we got this Torkoal that's actually going to be holding choice specs. Now, sometimes we see this Torkoal in Trick Room being able to have something like a Charcoal and Protect in case you need to have a defensive play available to your Torkoal. But that's actually going to make this a little bit interesting to see how Luke is actually going to choose which move to lock into with the choice specs. You can't make a wrong decision because what if you lock yourself into Eruption and then you do get attacked? So let's see what happens as we get into the first game of this set. We're going to see Luke lead the charge here with this Ice Rider Calyrex next to the Indeedee to give 2 different avenues to get this Trick Room up, where Brandon is going to have the Grimmsnarl next to Landorus Incarnate.
Yeah, this is a nice lead from Luke, I think, because first of all, Psychic Terrain means that you can't go for Fake Out, Thunder Wave onto the opposing side, so it means you can consider foul playing, like you're seeking here, or light screening, but light screen doesn't really get any value here. Landers is in an awkward spot, right? And you can see, yeah, the way to get around this is Water Terra. Another play you could potentially make is switch the Landers out into Zacian, which of course then resists a potential Glacial Lands. So from Luke's end, you'll basically be able to get Trick Room up here on turn 1. So the question is, do you want to maybe follow me with Inity and Trick Room just so Calyrex does not eat up the foul play? Luke can also considering going for a Terra with his Ice Rider. It's going to be normal so that it gets around the super effective hit of foul play, which will do a lot of damage.
It's still going to be taking neutral damage from everything else too. So I think you're okay if you are Brandon, letting the terrestrialization go up for Luke, and almost makes it feel a little bit better for yourself because now you know which Pokemon is terrestrialized and what you need to play around with. But to start out this turn, we are going to see Brandon commit to the terrestrialization onto the Landorus to get that Water Terra, and as you called it, there is going to be a match Terra for Luke.
Yeah, I think it makes sense from both ends, just saying, look, if I don't Terra, I'm just going to take way too much damage here, and so the idea is both players now will likely be able to survive with their Pokemon for the turn, but I think this probably favors Luke a little bit more, assuming that Trick Room goes up, and Sanseer starts off with the miss already. That Calyrex taking 0 damage.
Oh, that's really unfortunate because you're missing out on just a critical amount to actually deal with this Calyrex, but even though that is going to be a neutral hit, the Grimmsnarl took this Ice Rider Calyrex down to basically half HP. As it fires off a Glacial Lance back, it's going to be doing some nice damage across the board here to Brandon's Pokemon, but Luke gets that Trick Room up with the Indeedee.
Yeah, it's a big miss on Calyrex there because had the miss not happen, I think another Sandstorm Storm would potentially get a double knockout, right? And so that is the downside of running Sandstorm Storm. It is not exactly the most accurate move, and this is a pretty non-traditional Grimmsnarl on Brandon's end as well. There's no Reflect, so you're not able to really do that much in terms of support when Inidee's out on the field. So foul play, as you called out, yeah, very powerful. It's the advantage of the same type attack bonus from it. And so this next one you can consider, yeah, switching into Zacian. The question then is, does Luke potentially predict this? And what's also scary is Inidee does have that heal pulse, so it can actually just heal the Calyrex back up. This lead just seems really strong from Luke's end right now.
How do you get rid of the Ice Rider Calyrex before it starts to get that attack engine boost going with knockouts? Brandon's first call to action is going to be switching in this Zacian as it has to take this Glacial Lance. But since this Landorus does have that Water Terra type, it's going to be resisting those hits. But there's the heal pulse. This hard work that was done by the Grimmsnarl gets undone in a second, and another miss of the Sandstorm Storm is going to ensure that the Indeedee sticks around for the next turn.
And it did a lot of damage to Calyrex there, as you can see, just under 50%. And so, yeah, I think, you know, Luke is happy just playing it safe the last couple of turns, and that normal Terra just allows you to be in a pretty nice defensive position. And right now for Brandon, what you really want to do is obviously ideally stall out this Trick Room, right? But normally what you want to do to stall out Trick Room is protect, but should you protect, of course, then you can eat up a heal pulse from the opposing side. So I actually think it's like such a brilliant tech to have heal pulse on this Indeedee. Once again, not the most common move on this Pokemon. So Brandon wants to conserve this Landorus, help it stick around for a little bit longer. Should you go for the protect on that side, you do open up vulnerability to something like a Helping Hand plus a high horsepower to just knock out Zacian. So we'll see if Luke wants to play it safe here, maybe go for a follow me or just heal pulse and attack again.
Well, the protect for the Landorus means that it's not going to be taking this Glacial Lance damage, so unfortunately the Zacian not going to be so lucky. As it takes another Glacial Lance, you can see though that resist typing is going to help it out tremendously to get through the rest of this turn. But with another heal pulse, this Calyrex just won't go down. So Zacian's last hope is going to have to be this Behemoth Blade, as that takes it down to just about below half. But with heal pulse still on the table, this Calyrex is going to need 2 hits to take it out.
Yeah, it's, you know, Brandon has stalled out a couple turns of Trick Room, and like you can go for Heal Pulse here, but should you go for Heal Pulse, will the Calyrex be able to get a knockout, right? If it's high horsepower onto Zacian, that might just KO it. We saw Brandon lock in both of his attacks in Behemoth Blade and Sandstorm Storm. So the debate here is, do you want to Heal Pulse? You could also go for a Follow Me. I think Heal Pulse and high horsepower is really safe, honestly. So yeah, Zacian doesn't protect. That's a KO. And like you said, the engine now is rolling. +1 attack immediately to this Ice Rider.
Off to the races now with a +1, and it doesn't get any easier here for Brandon. There's still going to be a Heal Pulse to keep this Calyrex so safe. And this Sandstorm Sancier Storm, if it misses again, would feel pretty bad. It does hit both targets, so the Ndidi finally goes down for all the trouble it's caused in this game, but it feels almost too little too late.
I can't remember the last time in Scarlet and Violet we've seen so much value out of Heal Pulse. Like, that move got clicked basically turn after turn after turn and kept Calyrex around for so long, and this is kind of the ticking time bomb, which is Dark Urshifu, right? You've already committed your Terra to Landorus, and so the Wicked Blow right now is so strong. There's no Spirit Break on Grimmsnarl either, so this is looking really, really hard right now for Brandon because the Dark Urshifu is just free to click Wicked Blow, and the Calyrex is free to click Glacial Land. So in my opinion, Luke just had a really excellent lead that Brandon felt committed to, you know, I have to Terra to get out of it, but by Terraing, then you're still also not doing enough damage in return because of the heal pull, so maybe knocking out Ndidi a little bit quicker with like Earth Powers could have been valuable. The misses were obviously really unfortunate. The problem is once you get the knockout on Ndidi, Dark Urshifu just comes in and clicks Wicked Blow.
And this Psychic Terrain is about to expire as well, so it doesn't even have to be Wicked Blow. If you're playing for the long game of being outside of Trick Room, we could also consider locking in something like the Sucker Punch, but I think you're right with still having this next turn. Go for it. At least this Giratina is going to come out and be here in style. I think Giratina is one of the best shiny Pokemon in the entire game, so it's very cool to see it make an appearance here. But it's
how long will that appearance be is my question to you, Rose.
I don't think it's going to be very long, as this Glacial Lance is going to hurt really bad. It's actually just a one-hit knockout at +1, and that's another Glacial boost for this Ice Rider.
Yep, and now let's see, is it the Wicked Blow? It is. That's going to go through Protect. Choice Band going to get the knockout here, and this hard Trick Room combo just looks so hard to deal with right now. Lunala was not even revealed in the back. I think it would probably be a pretty strong pick with that Meteor Beam you can threaten Giratina, but you know, what are the key lessons here? It just felt like there wasn't enough damage output, and the heal pulse was really the thing that moved the needle, in my opinion. Like, this probably would have been pretty different if you're able to just, like, get damage and, you know, you can't heal on Luke's end. But Calyrex is just like, hey, like, enjoy doing 50% to me. My partner is just going to heal me all the way back up. So, I don't know. I'm thinking about adaptations for Brandon already going into Game 2, and, like, Zacian's interesting because you do at least resist Glacial Lance, and we saw it took Glacial Lance pretty well, right?
That was going to be, like, a 5-hit knockout.
Exactly, yeah. So with Swords Dance, you can, like, set up a Swords Dance maybe on turn 1 and then play the game from there. Rillaboom also does give you terrain control potentially, but Ndidi presumably will be slower than it, so if you lead Rillaboom, Ndidi will override it, but maybe a Rillaboom in the back with Fire Terra could be valuable. Either way, it just feels like, yeah, you need to be able to do a little bit more burst damage because this heal pulse is just too annoying to deal with otherwise.
And I'm thinking about all of the Sancier Storm misses, and I'm not entirely convinced that you get the Calyrex Ice to go down with a Foul Play and a Sancier Storm. Because, you know, the rolls looked a little bit like
I think it would have been
be
off
close.
by like 5-10% maybe.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I think you're right on the money, and with the like sword stance maybe being there to help out with the Zacian, at least, you know, Brandon does get one here on top of the Ndidi. The Ice Rider Calyrex finally goes down as he just takes some time to think about what to do next.
Exactly. And of course you get important information. Was it Lunala in the back? It absolutely was. But sometimes on these hard Trick Room teams you can actually drop one restricted because maybe you want your Torkoal to be the sweeper, right? So one other suggestion, Rose, that I think could be interesting, if you think it's going to be the exact same lead of Ndidi Calyrex Ice Rider, you could go Urshifu potentially and go for that coaching paired with Zacian. So
I like
just some food for thought. I think it's interesting because like the main problem with Zacian maybe into Ice Rider is, well, you don't want to eat up that high horsepower, right? But if you get a defense boost onto it, it's actually not doing that much damage, and so it feels so unintuitive to bring something like Urshifu into a matchup like this, but I mean, it also threatens with damage, and it's not Rocky Helmet on Ndidi on the opposing side, right? So you could go for coaching, you could also just go for damage, something like a U-turn plus a Behemoth Blade, and so those are some immediate options I'm thinking about if I'm in Brandon's shoes.
Yeah, that Grimmsnarl unfortunately just felt really bad on the Psychic Terrain. That's just a really hard matchup to have to take. As we see this Moongeist Beam from the Lunala finish off this Grimmsnarl, and we now get to go into Game 2. So I'm with you. For Brandon, I would really like to see something like the Zacian and the Urshifu in the lead. Coaching, of course, is going to be that twofold, where you get that attack boost as well as the defense. And when you look at what Luke has actually brought into this match, well, there's two very powerful physical attackers that would be a little bit difficult with the coaching.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, you know, Brandon may have been like, I'm worried about Lunala because like Lunala is pretty annoying for, say, my Giratina to deal with, and it takes a little bit of time for Zacian to deal with it as well. So I think like the Grimmsnarl Landorus combination makes a lot of sense if you're trying to respond to Lunala, where you can say, look, I'm threatening you with a super effective foul play. I can go for light screen and reduce your damage output, right? Because this Grimmsnarl is not running Reflect, it just means that like if it's not able to really get value out of that light screen, it feels quite bad, especially with Psychic Terrain on the opposing side, right? And so I'm wondering, like, maybe Luke then is like, I'm gonna potentially lead Lunala now, thinking that you might not go with Grimmsnarl. Either way, though, just felt like Inity plus Ice Rider was so oppressive, but I do think Brandon has potential answers to it. I just think, like, I mean, Giratina is another interesting adaptation because you can go for Fire Terra, but the thing about Giratina is that it just, like, doesn't do anything into Inity other than maybe try to, like, launch a Draco Meteor into it, and so that doesn't feel good as, like, a lead either.
Yeah, I think what's hard about facing off against hard Trick Room teams is that you've got to get the call right from the very get-go. What is the Pokemon that is going to be setting Trick Room?
Yep.
Where is it going to be in the midst of the other Pokemon that are in the back? It can be a really difficult mind game to have to get correct before you even get into the game.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's so much about, like, sequencing as well, right? Because part of what makes hard Trick Room so threatening is that turn one, they don't always have to click Trick Room. They can go for something like, you know, just damage, like even Helping Hand Glacial Lance, right? Or with Smeargle, Calyrex, Ice Rider, you can go for Decorate onto yourself. And so I think, like, hard Trick Room is a really, really scary matchup because if your opponent, like, gets turn one right, it often feels like things can snowball. So we're gonna get into game two. Let's see what the adaptations are. It's still gonna be Calyrex Inity. Is there an Urshifu here?
There it is.
Okay.
Wow. Okay, so the Urshifu and the Zacian are going to be what Brandon's adjustment are for this game, but what is he actually going to do on this first turn?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like coaching is probably the best approach. Like, I think Brandon now actually has a pretty significant advantage. Rose, my question to you then is, what is also in the back potentially from Luke's end? Is there a Torkoal this time, right? Because, of course, that would be pretty darn good into Zacian. So, yeah, this is exactly the adaptation I was talking about, and I think now it actually puts Calyrex Ice Rider in a much worse position. One of the interesting things to think about if you're Brandon is like, oh, do I want to get immediate knockouts, right? Because if I do, then, of course, it grants a free switch-in potentially, and that can actually be a little bit annoying to deal with. The Terra is going to be the Dragon type on Zacian, so that is good into Torkoal, should that come out, but not very good into Glacial Lance.
So you're forced in this position to just leave the Pokemon as they are. There's no terrestrialization committed from Brandon or Luke on this first turn. But as you see the coaching come through, Zacian's going to benefit from this tremendously. You see that attack increase that it's going to get on top of the Intrepid Sword boost that it got from just hitting the field on the first turn. His Behemoth Blade comes out at +2. That is just an instant one-hit KO, which is going to feel great to get that first KO on the board. But what does this Ice Rider Calyrex do? It just goes for Trick Room here. So you got the speeds if you're Luke, but Brandon did get a KO.
Yeah, and it's a very different game already from game one, right? Game one, it was like Indy staying on the field for 5 billion turns and consistently healing up the Calyrex Ice Rider. Now, but this Zacian is so scary, right? +2 attack, +1 defense. And it's going to be Urshifu in the back, so no Torkoal, which makes me think, like, this Zacian is so scary to deal with right now, right? Yeah, Wicked Blow will get a critical hit onto it, ignore the defense boost, but it's not enough damage, right? At the end of the day, this Zacian right now is threatening a one-hit knockout to both Pokemon on the opposing side. The downside for Brandon's end is you do have a Choice Scarf Urshifu stuck under Trick Room right now, so the question is, do you want to stay in and go for another coaching boost, or do you want to just switch out? As you see, there's that Landorus in the back in Giratina, but if you switch out, you eat up a Glacial Lance, you might actually just lose that Pokemon.
I think you're okay leaving the Urshifu in, because if you are for some reason lucky enough to get another coaching boost onto your Zacian, well now like it doesn't nothing is going to actually be able to stand tall to the Zacian. And with your point, I don't know how much you really want to give up a Pokemon here, but Brandon is going to decide to leave the Urshifu for later. If you're able to get out of Trick Room, then Urshifu can still be a very big threat with that Choice Scarf intact, but Giratina's going to come in instead. Look at that. High horsepower is going to do about 50% to the Zacian, but the close combat to follow up.
Oh,
what?
the crit!
The crit, no way!
Oh my gosh, I just don't think that's KOing without the crit. They had the defense boost there. It would have been close, but yeah, my guess is that that would have survived, and unfortunately now, that is a disaster for Brandon here. It feels like, yeah, he found the adaptation that he needed, but yeah, unfortunately, either of those, you know, who needs Wicked Blow critical hit when close combat is just gonna crit instead?
I think something's up with this Urshifu. No, but I mean, that is really unfortunate, because I'm with you. I don't think that KOs otherwise. there was that defense boost, and then maybe this Giratina would be able to come in and actually do something on the next turn, because Brandon's thought process there was, I get to swap in the Giratina, and it's not going to take, if it takes a Glacial Lance, whatever, but also I should be able to KO this Calyrex, or I'm just expecting that it's going to go for high horsepower, so it's free to bring in the Giratina here.
Exactly, yeah, and I also think part of it is last game we had an attack boost, so then I just fainted, but this time it was like, well, I probably am bulky enough to at least survive a regular Glacial Lance without the boost, but it's just tough because now Brandon is forced to bring Choice Scarf Urshifu out under the Trick Room, which never feels good, and this is normal Calyrex on the opposing side, so should it go for that normal Terra, well then you can't even go for the Poltergeist, which is like your best offensive option, but it is going to crucially be Giratina Terraing first here.
So Terra Fire will be the type for this Giratina. It's going to help it be able to use those Glacial Lances just a little bit better. As you can see, that's what Luke decides to opt into. It's going to be nice resistant hits on both the Urshifu and the Giratina, but with this close combat, I mean, Luke just called it right. That's going to be another knockout earned by this Urshifu. Now, could you imagine if Urshifu had a Glacial, like a you know, Ice Rider type ability?
Oh my goodness. Don't give them any more suggestions, no. Rose. You know, we already nerfed it for the next game. But just so powerful. Really nice call there saying, look, I know that if you go for a Terra, well, then close combat will work into you.
Yeah.
If you actually don't go for Terra, that could have been a really interesting turn, right? Because close combat basically just would have had not done anything. And I think Giratina maybe can be bulky enough to actually survive that Glacial Lance from the Ice Rider. So, you know, Luke making a really nice call, and it's going to be the Lunala coming in. I just don't think there's enough damage at this point, especially because basically the Urshifu is locked into close combat right now. Trick Room is still up as well, so it's kind of all up to Landers at this point. Yeah, you can hope to close combat into the Calyrex. And I think Luke also crucially, you know, hanging on to the Terra there, not going for Terra on Ice Rider. If you do, then of course you open up the weakness to close combat. But Glacial Lance comes out, and I think this is just going to be GG.
Yeah, I mean, this should just be a follow-up here from the Lunala with something like a Moongeist Beam or a Meteor Beam just to be able to KO this Urshifu, as we see Calyrex get that Chilling Name boost first. But it's just Expanding Force. That also seals the deal. Super effective hit into the Urshifu is going to get Luke the set win, 2-0.
I wish we could have played this game out without the critical hit because it felt like Brandon found the right...
They have with these teams, the amount of practice they must have had versus other archetypes. I think it's kind of interesting that they're matching up against each other because how much real practice can you say that you have had against an expert with a duo like this?
That's a really good point as we take a quick look at Matt's team here. Once again, super offensive. You've got the two Restricteds in Calyrex and a Choice Specs Terrapagos. Choice Spec's not the most common item on this Pokemon, but this set is just designed to hit as hard as possible. And of course, one thing to pay attention to is if you Terra in this matchup, then of course you can get rid of the Rain for a turn. That can be really crucial when fighting against Kyogre. Otherwise, you've got just really, really strong supportive options in Pokemon like Smeargle and Whimsicott.
And I'm thinking about how much support you actually provide with those Pokemon. You've got Decorate here on the Smeargle. We already saw a Decorate set earlier on our stream, but when you pair that with something that is really just kind of looking to go hard and hit fast, like the Terrapagos, like the Chi-Yu, that can really help out there if you're against those physical attackers. On the flip side of things, you've got Prankster Tailwind here from the Whimsicott. You do have three very powerful special attackers here with the Calyrex, the Terrapagos, and the Chi-Yu, so Fake Tears is also very powerful.
It absolutely is, yeah, and the combination of Fake Tears plus a Life Orb Astral Barrage or a Terra Starstorm can be really deadly. I'm interested in a couple of things here. I think Iron Hands, for example, on paper is pretty nice into Kyogre. When you go for that Water Terra, you'll be able to survive for a fairly long time. Kian's team also has that Roaring Moon, and Roaring Moon, of course, is actually really disruptive to Calyrex Shadow Rider, threatens it with Knockoff, for example. So Iron Hands can be brought out potentially to, say, Drain Punch it. It feels like the odd Pokemon out on this team because everything else is going to be so fast, and Iron Hands naturally is not a super fast Pokemon, but can be used to patch up some matchups and, of course, take a lot of hits while also being able to heal back with its attacks.
But when we look at Kian's team, I think a recent development that we have really seen here from Chien-Pao is actually some of them have been holding Assault Vest. And that is something that can be really powerful against things like the Shadow Rider Calyrex. But this Chien-Pao is going to be Focus Sash with a Stellar Terra.
And to your point, I also think the moveset on Chien-Pao is interesting because we've seen things like Crunch, for example, Throat Chop being used, but this is going to be triple coverage with Icicle Crash, Sucker Punch, Sacred Sword. However, what that means is against a Calyrex Shadow Rider, you aren't threatening with a non-Sucker Punch Dark type attack, right? So if Calyrex normally feels forced to Terra immediately, but here you don't necessarily have to because it's not like, yeah, if you don't attack with the Calyrex, then of course Champ Pao just won't be able to get that Sucker Punch off. But otherwise, this team is just super offensive. There's so many different ways that you can play with it, so many possible leads. You've got Roaring Moon, which once again I think is a really valuable pick into something like the Terrapagos, like the Calyrex here on the opposing side. Kyogre here crucially has that Grass Terra, so that's something like you utilize in this matchup to get around Spore, for example, from Smeargle on the opposing end. Champ Pao, of course, still a threatening Pokemon to Calyrex, even if the Calyrex isn't attacking, right? You can still launch Sucker Punches into that slot. So I'm mainly curious how both players will approach Terra in this game, because it feels like Calyrex is a Pokemon that still likes the Terra, especially if you're up against Roaring Moon in particular, for example.
I think the hard thing that Kian's going to have to work around is the fact that there's a lot of spread damage options on Matt's team. You look at Astral Barrage here from the Shadow Rider, something like Heat Wave or Snarl from the Chi-Yu, and even looking at Terrapagos if it Terrestrializes using Terra Starstorm to get that spread damage. There's not really a great way for Kian to get around that. I looked at a Pokemon like a Moongus and maybe saying, oh, Rage Powder would feel quite nice here, but that's one way that spread damage can just get around that. In the leads, though, we are going to see the Zacian next to the Roaring Moon, and quite a passive duo here from Matt with the Smeargle and Whimsicott.
Yeah, the most passive duo, honestly, possible. So interesting. I think when I see a lead like this, it's screaming to me, Smeargle probably just really wants to get a Spore off, shut down one single Pokemon, right? So it's going to be the immediate Moonblast plus Spore launch here. Wow, okay. So playing super aggressively here on turn one. Normally, Whimsicott's a Pokemon that won't deal a lot of damage, but it's pretty darn good into a Roaring Moon specifically.
You do still have Terrestrialization on board. Roaring Moon could Terra away from that weakness to the Flying type, and then all of a sudden, you're also still getting additional boosted damage to something like the Acrobatics, since you did see that booster energy consumed. It's just going to be a fake out for now into the Zacian as Roaring Moon gets away with a free Tailwind. Now, there is an opportunity for Matt to match that on the next turn since the Whimsicott does have Praester, but there's no Terrestrialization committed, so this is a free switch here for Kian on the Roaring Moon.
It is, yeah, and so getting, I think, that Tailwind up now puts Kian in a really offensive position as well. Matt, this next turn, of course, can just set up Tailwind himself and match it, and so the question is, what are you bringing out here right now? It's going to be that Urshifu. That is really powerful, of course, threatening Smeargle with something like that Surging Strikes immediately, and so Kian right now is in a position to potentially get a double knockout, right? You can just Surging Strikes into Smeargle. Zacian can go for a Behemoth Blade into Whimsicott. Of course, then you could follow me here to make sure that the Zacian moves first, and that is what Matt is indicating he wants to do. And it's actually going to be the Moonblast Hover saying, I don't even need Tailwind right now because it's like I don't need to outpace you this turn.
And also, how are you actually going? You would also need to get the KO here on the Zacian to begin with. But we are going to see a Terrestrialization committed onto the Urshifu. So you know that the Moonblast could be coming in, but now you also have the defensive Terra alongside the other side of the coin, which is going to be added offense if you decide to go for something like those Surging Strikes. So as we see this Smeargle go for the Follow Me, it's going to redirect away the Behemoth Blade, but that's where you see something like that Focus Sash really coming in clutch. But even without that, the Smeargle actually has quite a bit of bulk as it goes for a taunt. No incoming damage. This Urshifu just shuts off the Smeargle's supportive options.
Yeah, it was a really interesting turn, right? Like, Kian can do a bunch of different things there. You could actually even Swords Dance and Surging Strikes, knock out Smeargle, get the boost up on the way, but actually intentionally goes for that taunt. And the logic here is once I've taunted you, you're in a really awkward spot. This Smeargle just can't do anything basically at this point, right? And it's saying, well, if I taunt you, you're probably gonna have to switch. But if you make that switch, something like Calyrex or Terrapagos has to come in. This is such an offensive team. There aren't really that many defensive pivots. Iron Hands would have been the best one, but wasn't brought out into this battle. So we're gonna see the switch out here. Calyrex is gonna hit the field, but can Kian just get a knockout here?
I mean, Surging Strikes into that would be a pretty quick 1-2 punch. The Zacian also packs a mean attack pool with something like the Play Rough, as well as that Behemoth Blade. But for starters, we're going to see the Whimsicott go for the Tailwind. It's been staggered, so there are a couple of turns where Matt might be able to get that speed advantage later on, but the Behemoth Blade is going to ensure a knockout here. And this Urshifu is just going to go for Surging Strikes with the Mystic Water on top of the Terra Water. That's just a knockout onto the Shadow Rider Calyrex as soon as it comes in.
That is so much damage coming out. Calyrex now, of course, will faint. And this Urshifu does have Aqua Jet, right? So if you are Kian this next turn, you could, I think, just protect both of your Pokemon. Your own Tailwind will stall out, but then you can just Aqua Jet finish off Smeargle, and then, like, can Terapagos handle all the remaining Pokemon? I'm not quite sure. So I think like this game highlights the downside of hyper offense, which is that you often don't have good defensive pivots, and when you have to switch in a Calyrex to get around that, so dangerous. So one thing that Matt could have done there was just say, you know what, you're taunting me, but I'm just gonna stay in with Smeargle anyway. And I think Kian didn't want to Swords Dance earlier because of course then you face the pressure of Encore from Whimsicott, so saying, look, I just want to like click Behemoth Blade because it's such a consistent attack to go for. But yeah, I think Matt in a tricky position right now. Of course, can go for the fake out and can commit the Terra here, but then you also have to lock into an attack, and like there's still too many Pokemon, I think, on Kian's end. It doesn't feel great to commit to. So I think Kian can just play it safe here, and if I were in their shoes, probably just like double protect, then Aqua Jet KO Smeargle the following turn.
And you still have that unrevealed Pokemon in the back. Like, I'm just thinking about how Matt would get through this, and you're right. I think there's just way too many Pokemon at his disposal. Kian doesn't even go for the double protect here.
Yeah,
Just decides that
why not?
I will have an advantage here with the amount of offense that I have. Smeargle, you get to fake out, but that's going to be it for the rest of this first game. As Urshifu flinches, we get to see this Terapagos just go for it, a kind of a sad little Terra Starstorm. At least you do get the knockout onto the Urshifu here, but you still got two Pokemon that are going to have to fall to this Terapagos first.
Yeah, and the reason to not go for the protect there is specifically because Smeargle can theoretically decorate Terapagos and saying, look, I just have like, I know I have enough offense, so I don't even really need to worry about Smeargle, knowing that I can just like launch both of my attacks into you. Terapagos being slower here is what makes this so awkward as well, right? Like as you saw, like the Urshifu flinched before Terapagos got to move, and so it's just not going to be able to do enough in this endgame, staring down two super powerful attackers.
Is there any way out of this if Matt is still able to utilize these Tailwind turns?
No.
Yeah, like I'm only throwing it out there because you know he did do a great job of staggering Tailwind such that he does have an extra turn to play around with now. But you've got this Zacian that can just go for protect. The Chien-Pao as well does have the ability to do that, to stall out at least one turn. And then where do we go from here?
Yeah, the reason why I say no is because I just think Terra Starstorm won't get a knockdown onto either Pokemon here, and so then Sacred Sword plus Behemoth Blade should just be enough to knock out the Terapagos in return. And so that's why it's actually quite smart for Kian to cover for the potential Decorate option previously. But yeah, like at the end of the day, Matt just didn't get any value out of Calyrex Shadow Rider, right? And it's like, it actually maybe have been better for that to have been an Iron Hands rather than a Calyrex, so you can at least safely switch in. But the taunt on the Urshifu was so crucial in basically forcing Matt to make that switch out. So Terra Starstorm comes out, does really good damage actually, but it's not going to be enough, crucially.
I think that, yeah, the double up should be able to secure Kian in this very first game of this set. If Behemoth Blade is going to be the first to go, and yeah, Sacred Sword to follow that up should do enough. Now, as we head into game number 2, you're starting to talk about some of the adjustments that Matt could potentially bring to game 2, including the Iron Hands. But do you think that there's anything else that you feel like Matt may be able to do here that would be a little bit better? Like, just start out in game number 1, the lead was too passive, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that game was interesting, right? We saw the 4 Pokemon that Kian brought out. There was no Kyogre, right?
Yeah.
So he actually dropped a restricted Pokemon.
It.
And so, like, I think shows really strong awareness of, like, how to approach this matchup. I thought Matt could have gone for Spore on turn 1, potentially, instead of going for the Fake Out, because, like, you Tailwind then and, like, can immediately maybe put the Zacian to sleep, for example, giving you a little bit more momentum. But instead, yeah, he opted for a Fake Out Moonblast, which, like, it worked okay, but the thing is, like, Kian just had full speed control throughout that entire battle, which it's like Matt staggered the Tailwind, but basically didn't get anything out of those extra turns, right? So if you are going to stagger your Tailwind, you ideally like will want to get more value out of it. And also, you called out, right? Whimsicott Smeargle super passive in terms of damage. Moonblast actually did get the knockout on a Roaring Moon, but then it's like you're in this awkward position where you don't have your damage dealers out. So like you can consider leading Calyrex or Terapagos here. Both truthfully feel a little bit awkward because like the Calyrex is just weak to knockoff, right, from the opposing side. So then it's like maybe you consider the Terapagos instead and just start dishing out massive amounts of damage. Because I think like what Matt wants to do is ideally knock out that Roaring Moon, then Calyrex on your side can potentially come out and do a lot of damage.
Yeah, and so he was able to secure that first objective very early on in game 1, but then struggled to do so in the subsequent turns. As we take a look at the start for game 2, we do see that adjustment from Matt, leaving Smeargle on the bench or potentially in the back as the Terapagos hits the field in front of the Zacian and Roaring Moon for Kian.
So Terrapagos now obviously exerting a lot more offensive pressure. You can immediately just go for that tailwind, as previously indicated. Hovering the Moonblast. Oh, this is interesting. Water Terra Moonblast saying, look, I think you might go for acrobatics this time around because you saw that I was just willing to click Moonblast last time around, right? That was actually quite risky for Matt to even go for it, but it was smart calling out that Kian would maybe tailwind. However, it means that you are committing your Terra to Whimsicott, right? So that means no Terra Terrapagos, no Terra on Calyrex, and it does put both of those in a much tougher defensive position.
Yeah, and I think when I worry about that, I mean, Terrapagos does have at least like that Cherish Shell to play around with for the first hit. That might help you soak up just a little bit of damage. We're going to see the Terastallization committed onto the Roaring Moon, so maybe Matt actually does get this first turn correct. But it's about where do you navigate after that, and can you get enough out of this first turn Terastallization that it makes that risk worth it? And so as we see the Terras matched on both sides of the field, water for the Whimsicott and flying for the Roaring Moon, this is where things can start to get a little explosive. It's the acrobatics. So Matt does get that first call correct, as the Whimsicott is going to be able to live through that for now, but it's the double up of the Behemoth Blade that's going to cover for that Terra that knocks out Whimsicott before it gets a chance to move.
Yeah, that's a disaster, to be honest, right? Because now you do not have Tailwind in this game. It will be at least a Choice Specs Earth Power, but Kian saying, look, this covers for any possible play that you could go for. If you double up, if you don't Terra, then I'm just gonna knock you out. If you Terra, well, great, I'll like still get the KO. So Spear Release comes in, does pressure with Fake Out and Spore right now. Can also consider the self-decorate as you're seeing here. And I like this. Okay, Matt saying, you know what? Like, I feel like I'm already behind in this game. I'm just gonna make a big play, and maybe, just maybe, if I can get this decorate on Calyrex, it has the potential to sweep with Astral Barrage. But this is a big risk. Will Smeargle actually get this decorate off? Either slot could get doubled into quite easily right now. It's gonna just be another acrobatics. No need even for that tailwind.
Yeah, Kian sees the goal right in front of him, and it's going to be that first acrobatics onto the Smeargle to activate the Focus Sash. But as Zacian doubles up into it, this was a huge risk. If it had paid off, you're right. I think Matt is firmly back in the game. But now with the Smeargle and the Whimsicott down, and you're stuck with these two special attackers, I'm starting to see a hard time that Matt gets through this.
Yeah, I think Kian's approach in this game was honestly just play it safe and just like target aggressively, right? Like, I know your Whimsicott doesn't have Protect, so I can just launch my attacks into it. So really nicely done. Protecting here, trying to bait out a Protect from the Calyrex Shadow Rider. And, you know, if Calyrex does Protect here, then next turn you can just go for knockoff into it, get a knockout. So Matt does a nice job, at least not protecting this turn, opens up the door to Protect next turn as you knock out the Roaring Moon. I think it, basically keeps him around for a little bit longer. So let's pay attention to this next turn. Will there just be a knockoff and a Calyrex? Does Calyrex Protect?
But you also know now that the Terrapagos is stuck, choice locked into this Terra Starstorm, which is going to be a single target attack for the rest of the game because you expended that Terastallization early on.
Exactly. So, Matt just goes for Astral Barrage, and it's just knockoff. Yeah, and a Calyrex.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you have to make the aggressive read because you're so far behind already.
Yeah.
You may as well try to go for it and see if you can catch some sort of mistake from Kian. But there are none to be had here. Behemoth Blade is going to break that Terra Shell from the Terrapagos, but I think this is a sad turtle here. It still has a lie, even though you have that Terra Shell.
It sticks around for a little bit, we'll get
it doesn't even get the knockout out of the Roaring Moon. No. Okay, well, we are going to see the forfeit from Matt and a 5-0 as Kian continues through his day one of LA.
Proving why he
Really strong start with this Pokemon that you just do not see very often. It doesn't have great offensive stats, so it's purely in the support role, and it has a really interesting moveset, right? It has Baneful Bunker, which is a strict improvement on Protect, being able to poison opponents that come into contact with it. Wide Guard, very good into the restricted Pokemon format where, a lot of spread type attacks are strong. Toxic's not something you see in VGC very often, something you see a little bit more in singles, but able to whittle down opponents who like to set up. And finally, Infestation is a move that many players might not be familiar with, but is just like Fire Spin, trapping opponents and doing a little bit of chip damage every turn.
This team just has so much support too. I'm looking at the Sinistra, and I mean, you do have an attacking move with the Shadow Ball, but that is a supporting Pokemon. You Rage Powder, Hospitality to be able to get some of the HP. Even looking at something that is so offensive like this Ogre Pond, you have Follow Me, your Spiky Shield, and then Encore instead of another move. You only have this Ivy Cudgel. Incineroar, you're going for, you know, support, and then a knockoff. So a lot of pressure on things like this Miraidon Trapagos to be able to deal that damage. Trapagos too, this is going to be a little bit more of that setup. We got that Calm Mind. So that makes a lot of sense when you look at all of the ways to kind of slow the pace of the game on this team.
Yeah, taking a step back on this archetype, we had Francesco Piopero have a lot of success with this team last year, pairing Terapagos with the Choice Scarf from Miraidon along with Incineroar and Sinistra to provide a lot of control in the game, but usually it was the pair with Sinistra and Incineroar, and the other two are pretty free. So it's really exciting to see Toxapex and Ogerpon being the pick for Aaron Trailer here. Over on Justin's end, we see a Groudon that we recently saw as well. This one also having the Assault Vest item and being paired with the Imprison Calyrex Ice Rider. I think we saw it paired with Imprison Zamazenta, so I'm not sure what it is about Groudon wanting to be paired up with these imprisoning Pokemon. But yeah, also holding Citrus Berry, like there's so many interesting sets in this one team.
Especially too, for Tang, this is something that is a little bit more familiar. There's not necessarily too many people that are outrunning this Sun variant with this Jump Bluff, but this is something we've got to see out of him from Worlds. And I mean, it is, when you see a Sun team with Jump Bluff, it is so strong for a reason. Jump Bluff and just the ability to be able to shut things down and even just have the speed control with the Tailwind is so nice on this team. And that's really nice too, paired up with a couple of these really strong attacking options. There's so many Pokemon that can really utilize this Sun. Chi-Yu, well, you have your super strong fire type attacks, Flutter Mane, being able to get that Photosynthesis boost, the Raging Bolt as well. Like, there's so much synergy here with the Sun that I'm really excited to see. And of course, when you are talking about that Calyrex set that does have that in Prison, it's a Pokemon too that if you are looking at that slower pace that Trailer's trying to play in, well, something like that Leech Seed for that longevity can really make sure that you can play at that pace as well.
Yeah, I love how you pointed that out because it's not really apparent at first glance like that everything takes advantage of Sun, but it's true. Everything except for Calyrex Ice Rider really benefits from the Sun in some shape or form. The Jump Bluff here actually seems to be one of the matchups where it might be the least oppressive because there's a Miraidon on the other side being able to, yeah, not only set the electric terrain, but also threaten really strong electric type attacks into it. And yeah, I think it makes sense that we see the Groudon come out here, which pretty hard to check over from Aaron's side.
Right away, starting with 3.5 restricted Pokemons. Let's give our respect over to Raging Bolt, as Sun is going to come out over on Justin's side of the board, though. Of course, we have to see all the activations out here. And for Aaron, that is first going to be, well, Electric Terrain with that Miraidon and the Electric Seed for the Strapagos to furthermore help us stick around.
Yeah, pretty awkward position, I think, for Aaron's perspective, like where you want to Volt Switch. If you want to Volt Switch, you want to go into the Raging Bolts because it would be immune for the Groudon, but then the Raging Bolt could protect, and then you could eat a pretty big Precipice Blades. On the other hand, you could go for something like a Draco Meteor into the Raging Bolt to KO it, but of course there's a risk that it would protect. If you want to go into the Groudon, it's holding the Assault Vest item, so it's going to be able to shrug it off pretty well. And on the other hand, this Raging Bolt's really strong now, right? It has the boost from the Sun, and it also has the boost from the Electric Terrain. You can turn both the Sun and the Terrain off with the Terapagos Terastallization, but you'd be committing that pretty early on. And I'm not sure if that's you. I think you want to be really careful when you Terastallize your Terapagos on a Sun team because Sun is so central to Justin's strategy, as you pointed out earlier. You want to be really like pinpoint precise on when you decide to get rid of the Sun.
Well, we're saying we do not want that Sun around at all. Right away, Terastallization will be spent. Terapagos, well, it's going to get terrifying. And of course, with that Terraform Zero, we are getting rid of all of these nasty field effects. You've already gotten your boost for yourself. You don't want the other Pokemon to have that as well. As called out, though, that Raging Bolt, the only viable option to Volt Switch into is going to go for the Protect, but never the target. Draco Meteor in Groudon instead, but as called out as well, that Assault Vest just makes sure you're not doing much damage at all. And Precipice Blades in return, not enough for a one-hit KO, but oh so much damage. At least with the Terapagos, sure, you're not fishing for KOs this turn. You're looking to start setting up to make sure on these next coming turns you can do the most.
Yeah, you can see the one anti-synergy that you can see with the Miraidon Terapagos teams, which is that if you Terastallize your Terapagos, you lose the damage output from the Miraidon. It would have, done more than half into the Groudon, and next turn, yeah, I guess you wouldn't be threatening a KO since your special attack would be dropping. But I think, yeah, it makes sense that Aaron went for that because if the Raging Bolt decided to attack that turn, it would have done a lot of damage with those damage multipliers we talked about earlier. But I think he's still in a pretty good spot, like having taken very little damage on the Terapagos and getting a Calm Mind up. means like the matchup into the Raging Bull is a lot better now, and with the Sun gone, really able to mitigate a lot of damage, especially if there's a Sinistcha or Incineroar ready to switch in. There's a lot of support ready for this little turtle here.
And I mean, Miraidon, it has that special attack drop. It's not going to really do too much damage. So Sinistcha hitting the field instead would be able to take any majority combination of hits quite well and bring this Terapagos back up to full health. Precipice Blades will be one of those attacks that it can shrug off pretty well. Terapagos has that earlier defense boost, and Thunderbolt as well. Sinistcha, it gets brought down to about a third of its health, but that still seems relatively fine because Terapagos has virtually just gone, well, undamaged. Terra Starstorm now, we have that special attack boost, and it will be hitting into both of these Pokemon. Bring Raging Bolt down to a considerable amount. Groudon will go down next turn if it takes that hit.
Yeah, really good switching in for Aaron there, soaking up not only the Precipice Blades, but also the Thunderbolt from the Raging Bull. As you said, the Terapagos basically not taking that much damage. It basically took 0 damage between the Hospitality game from earlier, and now threatening a double knockout onto both the Groudon and the Raging Bull. If Justin wants to set the Sun again for those Pokemon that really like to benefit him, you'd have to probably take a +1 Terra Starstorm in that slot. So yeah, really, really good turn for Aaron. Now the Sinistcha has a lot of flexibility because it just provides that support to Terapagos. There's not really a knockout being threatened onto the Terapagos here, so Aaron can protect the Sinistcha, switch out for something else in the back. And also another important point is that the Raging Bolt was faster than the Terapagos, which is something that both players would want to take note of because naturally Terapagos is supposed to be a little bit faster.
At this point, too, the Sun, needing it for maybe later on, will just be a little switcheroo as Calyrex Ice Rider. Oh, the double switch, though. Okay, this means that the only momentum that Justin can take this turn is just this double switch. It will be jump up in the back, so again, imperative that you get that Sun up. At least for the switch, the Sinistcha isn't doing too much, but it does mean both of these Pokemon hitting the field will be taking this hit. How much it's going to do? Well, wow. Jumpluff won't be able to survive another one of those.
Yeah, and the Jumpluff, a little bit surprising to me to see since, yeah, the Miraidon is such a good check into it. And I guess you want to see the Jumpluff come in right after the Calm Mind happened, right? Because then you can lock the opponent into the Calm Minds and not be able to attack again. But it feels like it came out just maybe 1 or 2 turns too late, where now the Terapagos is already set up. Yeah, you could lock it into Terra Starstorm, and that's just not going to be really enough. And as long as Aaron makes sure that he has the Electric Train up while the Jumpluff is on the field, then there's no risk for the Terapagos to go to sleep. So I think it makes sense that, yeah, he would be risking the Miraidon here.
I mean, Miraidon will re-hit the field at this point, and speed control over on Justin's end. Jumpluff has a decent amount of speed, and we're not looking at the most of it over on Trailer's end, so it makes sense it would outspeed, and that's going to allow this Calyrex Ice Rider to take the hit as well. Miraidon, just a sacrifice, as it will go down instantly, but again, just not too much damage has been done onto this Terapagos. Now a Terra Starstorm yet again. The only thing this Jumpluff will have been able to do is be able to set that Tailwind. Calyrex, again, is just taking a lot of damage turn after turn.
Yeah, it's you can see the Electric Seed from the Terapagos pay off dividends here, because with the Calyrex getting the attack boost here, it becomes a little bit scarier, but because just that extra boost in defense means that it has more than half its health left, could recover even more from the Sinistcha if it wanted to. And yeah, it's just such an interesting battle of like offense versus defense, where clearly like Justin's just trying to push as much damage onto the table to overrun the Terapagos, but Aaron just has such a strong, defensive backbone, whether it's the Miraidon that can set up the electric terrain, it's a Sinistcha that can heal this Terapagos, which, as we can see, it has so much HP.
At this point, though, eyeing up the Sinistcha and the Incineroar that Aaron still has, it's a lot of eggs in the Terapagos basket at this point. Sinistcha re-hitting the field, again, will bring this HP up even again. So, again, the Terapagos has not taken much. But that is going to be your main way of dealing damage to get through these 3 remaining Pokemon over on Justin's side.
Yeah, the one thing that makes me nervous when I see things like this is like, okay, like Aaron looks like pretty favored here, but all it takes is 1 critical hit to do a ton of damage, right? Like the Calyrex is boosted, the Raging Bolt is also boosted with the electric terrain. If you can ignore that +1 defense boost or +1 special defense boost, that can quickly, kind of steamroll through the rest of Aaron's Pokemon, because, he's invested so much into this Terapagos. If it goes down, the game plan's basically over. He just doesn't have that many offensive Pokemon, so the 4th, as we saw, was Incineroar, just not going to be able to carry the team. So really needs to make sure that he manages his risk very appropriately. And opens himself up to as little critical hits as possible. And Justin, on the opposite side, is just trying to get as much offense, get as many attacks out so that he has one more extra opportunity to get that critical hit, get that paralysis, etc.
I mean, that last turn, everything on the field except for that Calyrex going for the protect now. So this gets interesting because for this Raging Bolt, I mean, even just for anything on Justin's side of the field, like we do have a little bit more of that speed. But Raging Bolt, just another swap.
Yeah, it's going to basically sacrifice the Groudon, so now you get the Sun up, really setting up for that Raging Bolt to come in the back, but yeah, I don't know if it's going to be enough. We see they're essentially to go for the Rage Powder, yeah, wanting to soak up the Raging Bolt damage, so it makes sense that Justin would want to switch out there.
Glacial Lance, though, this is going to be the dual hit, so Rage Powder doesn't do anything, but Terapagos was not, Terapagos was spared from the critical hit. Sinisha was not, so if that's going to go any which way, well, it's good it happened how it did, because it would KO anyways. That would be a second Chilling Day boost, give it over, though, but eyeing up this Terra Starstorm and the amount of damage that has been done, okay, actually it's not going to be enough after that prior Citrus Berry recovery, so Groudon does go down, but the Calyrex sticks around for one more turn.
Yeah, I think this turn is going to be interesting because when you're face down with a Fake Out here and you have two Pokemon that can protect, it's very... Oh, I guess we don't have a Protect on the Calyrex, so that's interesting. Yeah, so Justin doesn't have that option. So Aaron, if he wanted to, can knock out this Calyrex this turn if he wanted. So it seems to me that Justin has one more opportunity to get a critical hit. Aaron can stop a attack coming out from either the Raging Bolt or the Calyrex, but the other one will be able to move before the Tropius thanks to the Tailwind. So if he can get through this turn without getting a critical hit, it can change everything. Oh, wow. Justin Tang calling out, saying, I think you're going to Fake Out into my Raging Bolt.
So Raging Bolt has protected, and Justin Tang is going to get it right. Aaron trying to target down the Fake Out into that slot, and notably, Calyrex did not protect. So Glacial Lance, once again, no critical hit, though. So it's a Terapagos that is still going to be at an okay amount of health for that, and can fire a response with this Terra Starstorm. And of course, Raging Bolt stays safe, but now we have gotten to the point where so much damage has been done onto this Calyrex. Only one Pokemon on Justin's end of the board.
Yeah, and with how low this Raging Bolt is and seeing how, yeah, Incineroar has access to a Dark-type move, I think, no matter what kind of critical hits that Raging Bolt can dish out, I think Aaron would be able to take home the 1v1 at the end. So, yeah, like, really, really interesting game again of like all this offense coming out from Justin. Could it get through the, the defense on Aaron's side, and in the very end, in the very last turn where Justin got that call correct, it just wasn't enough.
I mean, we'll go for the Terraformation at this little endpoint, and called out the speed earlier. Thunderbolt will take down this Terapagos, so at least you end off taking it out, right? But again, you've taken so much damage on this Raging Bolt. There's going to be that Life Orb recoil. And with knockoff on this Incineroar, that'll be enough for Aaron Traylor to put himself up 1 in the set.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking from like Justin's perspective, like how do you adapt from here? Like it didn't feel like Jumpluff was really worth it. Like sometimes you want to bring a Tailwind setter just so that you can get the Tailwind up and then really ride the momentum of the Tailwind to overwhelm your opponent, and you're really okay taking that Pokemon deficit. But it just didn't feel that worth it for Justin because I don't think his offensive pieces were strong enough to like fully take advantage of the Tailwind, and a lot of his Pokemon are just naturally faster than Aaron's Pokemon. I think Miraidon is really the only Pokemon, especially out of his brings, that are faster than the majority of Justin's Pokemon. As we saw, even the Raging Bolt is faster than the Terapagos, so maybe he'll realize, okay, I actually don't need Tailwind as much as I initially thought. Maybe I can bring something that's a little bit more offensive. Flutter Mane doesn't seem that appealing to me other than to get like an Icy Wind off because, yeah, it's just not going to get the kind of boost that you want, but Chi-Yu is pretty interesting to me. You have a Choice Scarf that can get Snarls off, Snarl being really important into a double restricted pairing that is both special attacking, so that could be another adaptment. But yeah, I think not having Protect on the Calyrex Ice could also be a little bit tricky because you can't even go for that Leech Seed into the Terapagos and try to stall it outright. Like you're gonna just keep taking damage because you can't Protect.
I mean, even just going back to the beginning of that game, we got to see a lot of damage dealt, but not quite enough. And it was never really damage in the Terapagos that made any sort of significant impact, right? So sure, the Miraidon takes a lot of damage, maybe doesn't deal the most in return, but Terapagos makes it out of that turn relatively unscathed, right? You set up your Calm Mind, you bring your Sinisha in, and everything else just kind of seems like this big distraction for what really is the main event, which is this Terapagos that it now had that Electric Seed defense breeze. It now has this Calm Mind boost, and it just never looked like it was in danger, right? So maybe targeting down or making sure your lead can target it down, not let it get away with that.
Yeah, and speaking of getting away with that, like, Justin could have switched in that jump left a little bit earlier, right? Like as soon as that first Calm Mind went up saying, boom, you know, I'm going to threaten you with this Encore. And especially since the Sinistra Rage Powder not follow me means that it can't redirect Jump Bluff's Encore. Like you are immune to the Rage Powder effects. So it definitely is an option for Justin. And now I'm wondering if Aaron decides to lead with Terapagos again, is he going to want to go for that same move and potentially be trapped into Calm Minds?
Okay, a switch up though going into this. Set the Flutter Mane maybe wasn't the the greatest option, but will be prioritized going into this one. And that's going to be one thing with this team is when you get the Sun, Flutter Mane is a Pokemon that can benefit so much from it, being able to right away get that boost and pressure from here on out. So a way to maybe try and pressure, definitely would pressure into this Miraidon.
Yeah, it's another awkward turn for Aaron where he wants to maybe go for a Volt Switch, get rid of the Focus Sash on the Flutter Mane, but can very easily protect. I think it was a little bit more obvious, so to speak, for Justin to go for Protect in that slot in Game 1 because you're threatened by that Draco Meteor getting a KO. But here it's a little bit more like opaque to me, where the Flutter Mane could easily attack if it wanted to, maybe go for an Icy Wind, go for a Moonblast to get some big damage onto Terapagos before it gets that Calm Mind up. And yeah, this Groudon's still pretty well positioned here. Again, yeah, I'm not sure if that Jump Bluff was going to come in to potentially check that Calm Mind, but we see that there's no switches up from either player.
And no switches. We're just taking this turn how it is. And the Flutter Mane that would have loved that Sun is about to get it taken away as yet again Terastallization on this very first turn coming out from Terapagos. Sunlight is gone, and so is this terrain. Now, from where it goes from here, Flutter Mane will protect, so not looking to really pressure with this Pokemon and maybe anticipating a hit into it. And that's going to show to be true. Miraidon Volt Switch. So not only do you no damage, but you're also stuck on the field, which means you will eat this Precipice Blades. It took it last time. It'll survive again through this. But Aaron, notably, is not going to go for a setup. Instead, right away, trying to get some damage out on the board, going for this Terra Starstorm. Again, it's just going to be Groudon taking the hit. And, I mean, with the Assault Vest, it's just barely any damage.
Yeah. At face value, with this kind of setup, it would be really tempting to click that Calm Mind because, yeah, like you have two Pokemon that aren't threatening a lot of immediate burst into you, but Aaron's saying, yeah, I want to respect that jump lift potentially being in the back and going for that attack instead, and it ends up being a pretty good turn for Justin getting a lot of damage onto that Miraidon. And I wonder now, does Aaron think he's safe? Does he think that there's no jump left in the back? Can he start setting up those Calm Minds? Because, yeah, that would be very, very beneficial for him.
Yeah, you now know 3 of the 4. Volt Switch will find its mark into the Flutter Mane, so doing some good amount of damage, but notably as well a little bit of a switch. And we get to see we are running back the same game plan from game number 1, aka we have a lot of support for this turtle. And as well, I mean, it's going to be Incineroar to hit the field to also do a really good Intimidate onto the Calyrex on the opposing end. Will take the Moonblast as well. Won't deal quite half health, but Terra Starstorm, again, no boost coming on out. And Flutter Mane's not knocked out, and Calyrex just takes that hit so well.
Yeah, I think it's actually not bad for Aaron to see that Flutter Mane not go down because, again, it just doesn't, it's not really pressuring a lot of burst onto either of these Pokemon, and it gives Aaron one more turn to reposition, bringing in a Sinistra maybe not so great into the Calyrex right here, but has the opportunity to fake out here. Again, with the Calyrex not being able to protect, he could get a lot of damage onto that Calyrex if he wanted to do that. But it makes sense that he would want to preserve his Flutter Mane for a little bit later into the game here.
Yeah, already taken so much damage. It's going to be Groudon to re-hit the field. Something that, again, with the Terra Starstorms on the opposing end, it's really just not doing the most amount of damage. So you get to preserve the Flutter Mane. Groudon can soak up this hit. But also, this Calyrex hasn't been stopped in its tracks, so it's going to be enough damage to take it just into Citrus Berry range. It'll leave it about where it was, but it doesn't get flinched. No fake out means a Leech Seed. So if we're looking at longevity on the board for Terapagos, it is no longer there. And Knockoff is just not doing the most amount of damage. We already ate that berry.
Yeah, I guess if the remove order was slightly different, it would have been a lot of damage to the Calyrex. Maybe not knocked out, but having done so much more damage with that knockoff. Not only that, but also not eating its citrus berry like you identified. So yeah, if that was a parting shot, maybe then you would have an interesting situation where Aaron would be able to volt switch for sure this time if he wanted to, since there's a Pokemon that can't protect a rank to the Groudon. But now, really being face down with a lot of pressure, this Groudon going to be able to do a ton of damage into this Incineroar that cannot terastallize since it was used on that Terapagos. And this Terapagos is leech seeded right now, so yeah, pretty scary position for Aaron. I wonder if he wants to switch out the Terapagos since there's no Calm Mind set up yet, and the opportunity cost is not so big.
Yeah, you definitely don't want your Pokemon to be leech seeded. That's going to be sticking around, but then it's also kind of an awkward spot because of the amount of pressure that these Pokemon can do into anything swapped in.
Yeah.
And so it's a rough one. Precipice Blades from the Groudon is going to prove true to that, but oh my goodness. Terapagos, critical hit. Takes so much damage. Miraidon goes down. Now just the one Pokemon out on the field. Does go for the Calm Mind, but I think it's just a little too late for that critical hit. And this Calyrex that hasn't gotten to move. And of course, when you're eyeing up the Leech Seed damage that's going to take effect at the end of the turn, if we even make it there. Single target now, Terapagos goes down. And now we just have supporting Pokemon with, well, no big bad restricted left to support.
Yeah, I like you talked about, since there's so much pressure on the Terapagos to get damage down, as soon as it goes down, you have these two support Pokemon that just really can't face down these two restricteds over on Justin's end. I think on a lot of other matchups, maybe Aaron can rely on the Miraidon for offensive output because Justin has, Sash Flutter Mane, has Raging Bolt that can resist electro type attacks, has Groudon that has, a notoriously good matchup into the Miraidon. Just can't rely on it as like a secondary weapon, so to speak, as much as he can in other matchups. So there's a lot of pressure on this Terapagos, and I wonder if the fourth Pokemon on Justin's end is that Jump Left Sierra. Like, he was accounting for this entire time, but what if it's just like Raging Bolt?
Right? But, and I mean, at this board state, I mean, he's going to try and take out these Pokemon and never gets revealed. But yeah, if he was playing so carefully to just make sure that you're never going to get Encore locked by something like that Jump Left, I mean, it worked out so well. And by the time it's like, okay, well, this feels relatively safe. Justin's not bringing in this Pokemon. I haven't seen this fourth Pokemon yet. The Pokemon the Terapagos had just taken too much damage. It hadn't really accomplished much. So we'll get into closing moments of this match. 2 Pokemon left for Aaron on the field. And now, well, Terastallization coming on out for Justin's end. They might be supportive Pokemon, but there's still a little bit that can be done, and you got to make sure that you're closing this one out strong. Groudon doesn't get to do much on this turn. Terastallization, well, Sinisha with the Shadow Ball is going to hit into it for really just not that much damage. The Glacial Lance in return, it won't necessarily do the most either because of the Intimidates that have come on through, but Sinisha still takes a lot.
Yeah, makes sense for Justin to go for that very safe water Terastallation on the Calyrex. The Sinistra, very unique in not having the typical Matcha Gotcha, the signature move that it's known for, having Shadow Ball to check those Calyrexes, but since Justin didn't expend his Terastallization yet, able to have a lot more defense into the Sinistra. Precipice Blades, is it going to be able to knock out this Incineroar here? I think every Precipice Blade has hit so far, so maybe Aaron thinking, okay, surely in the game 3, there's going to be some that are going to miss.
Don't put that energy out here is all I'm saying, okay? We already have enough trouble with Bleak Wind Storms and Regulation High. We don't need to hear it from Groudon as well. I mean, that's just going to be so much damage into Incineroar. We want to talk about misses. I think you jinxed the wrong person.
Well, I think Aaron was okay to see the miss happen there over any other. Yeah, and also with that critical hit earlier also making a pretty big difference. So you can see Aaron thinking a little bit, saying, yeah, I'm not sure I can bring this one back, so let me think of my game plan for game 3. I think Justin identified maybe not a weakness, but noticing that the Leech Seed is particularly effective on that Terapagos, not only because it's a set of Pokemon, but because it has a really big HP stat, right? So Leech Seed being able to take out a percentage rather than a hard HP number means that Justin's Pokemon can recover a lot. So I wonder if he can maybe position the Miraidon in front of the Calyrex. If he can do that, Calyrex can't even Terastallize out of, getting hit by a strong electric type attack. And that means he can check that Calyrex Ice Rider before it can get that Leech Seed off. So curious to see how the position is going to be different and whether if we'll see that Toxapex in game 3.
Oh, that would be an interesting one for sure. I love to see where Aaron can take this in game number 3 because, in game number 2, I mean, You called out that leech seed, the fact that we didn't even get that setup, and then just the pivoting on Justin's end as well. Something like the Groudon, when it doesn't eat a Draco Meteor on the first turn, has so much staying power in this match thanks to that Assault Vest, right? So the targeting from Aaron to try and Volt Switch into this Flutter Mane instead that it just protected, well, you didn't really get to accomplishment, and it really left a big piece of the puzzle for Justin. So healthy. So once we got into later points of the match, well, he could switch it out. He could switch it back in to be eating these hits. And Terapagos without those boosts just really wasn't that damage potential. So going into the game 3 now, I'm curious where this could go, especially too for Aaron. He never really did get to figure out what that 4th Pokemon was, and that changes things a lot.
Yeah, one thing I'm noticing is that Justin's team feels pretty weak into Intimidate more than I would expect. The Calyrex Ice Rider known to have something like Clearing Amulet so that you aren't taking those attack debuffs from Intimidate, but this one actually has Citrus, and the Groudon has the Assault Vest item, so also a little bit more defensive. So maybe Aaron could leverage the Incineroar a little bit more aggressively and maybe even lead it, right? Because there's a lot of Pokemon that don't want to see that Intimidate, and it's pretty good defensively as well. Over on Justin's end, I mean, the Groudon feels really, really good, right? Like, there's no Pokemon that can hit it for super effective damage over on Aaron's side. I guess the Ogerpon can sort of free ride onto the Sun, but that's basically it. It's really hard to punish a Groudon lead. So from Justin's perspective, you know, do you have that jump up in the back? Like, I don't think even as viewers we figure that out in game 2. So does Aaron want to go for the Calm Mind or not? Like, I'm actually really excited to see the first few turns here. I think it can determine the momentum for the rest of the game.
I mean, it definitely did in game 1 and game number 2.
Yes.
Again, Aaron has such a Terapagos-focused team, and really being able to set it up for success or not has been, I mean, little in these last couple of matches. But I'm curious then with where we can see these adjustments come out, and if it's going to be enough. Reminder, both of these trainers are sitting at 5-0. So a win here would not only keep them undefeated, which is always great, but will put them into phase 2 of our competition. Lock that up for our final Scarlet Violet event. Let's get into it, figure out what's going on. Flutter Mane Groudon yet again for Justin, and Terapagos and Miraidon for Trailer.
Yeah, Justin Tang saying if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And Aaron saying, yeah, I'm going to be able to solve this lead, even though I lost with it in game 2. So pretty interesting here. Yeah, it's like the Incineroar is not a great switch in to want to take a Precipice Blade. On the other hand, Sinistcha is not a bad position here either, but again, I think the question for me is, does Aaron go for the Calm Mind or not? Because I felt like even though he was attacking, right, it was a more passive game 2 for him where he just kept attacking these Terra Starstorms. They just don't do enough damage when you don't have that boost there, but we don't see a switch in from Jump Bluff, so Calm Mind here could be big.
Yeah, but it is a Flutter Mane that protects and not going for the damage on the Groudon. Instead, again, trying to find this pivot, trying to find that damage onto that Flutter Mane. It is not going to be successful. Going on the opposing end, though, no Terra coming out from Trailer means that, you know, all the trains stick around. Terapagos takes no damage, but Miraidon, again, a hefty fee to sticking around on the field. It will be a Calm Mind, though, so Terapagos, no Terastallization spent, and it will get the special defense and special attack boost for the next turn.
Yeah, that was a pretty heads-up play for Aaron to not Terastallize Terapagos turn 1 like he did in the first 2 games, because here he's able to maintain the Terra Shell, able to take that resistant damage from that Precipice Blades instead of neutral. And now also, if he decides to Terastallize, this Miraidon will be able to attack before the Flutter Mane, since the Terastallization will be able to get rid of the Sun, and the Miraidon will be able to pivot out before the Flutter Mane can attack. So we'll be able to maintain that Miraidon and maybe bring in something like the Sinistcha to heal up the Terapagos while also providing it some pretty good support. And yeah, really, really important that he got that Calm Mind up there while that Jump Bluff nowhere to be seen from Justin's end.
I'm so worried about those Groudon, though, and just not really taking any damage on that first turn, because again, even if it will be taking a bit more coming out from these Terra Starstorms, it still has an Assault Vest and is been so well matched up against this Pokemon. It will be now Terastallization, so Terrain is gone, the Sunlight also gone, and Flutter Mane just a little bit more vulnerable out on the field, as yeah, we can just go for this Volt Switch once again. Dealing a little bit less than last time. We got 2/3 of our health left, but this is where we can see either the Incineroar, maybe not if you're expecting the Precipice Blades, but the Sinistcha would definitely be nice to get all of that health back. But Incineroar would give an Intimidate.
Yeah, I guess with Sinistcha, you'd get a little bit more value if the Terapagos had taken a little bit more damage later, getting that full 25% of the Hospitality. And maybe also just judging that, yeah, maybe Incineroar is a little bit more expendable for Aaron. And connecting both Precipice Blades again for Justin's. Yeah, wow, this Incineroar, really, really good training here, taking both those strong attacks and firing off with this Terra Starstorm. Is it going to KO that Flutter Mane? It didn't without the boost earlier. Oh, and it's the knockout.
Flutter Mane goes down. Groudon is going to be able to soak up the hit, and Incineroar making it through the turn. I didn't think it was going to be able to take the Precipice Blades, but sure enough, Incineroar almost always somehow survives through the craziest of turns. And now fake out pressure from Aaron going on to this next. A change up from Justin, though, as Chi-Yu will be coming out. And this one gets interesting because not only is there a lot of strong offense here, you have speed with the Choice Scarf, and there is also options like Snarl to mitigate what this Trapagos can do. Yeah,
Snarl seems really high value here because Incineroar's so low, even though it resists it, probably in range of that Snarl and also be able to lower that Trapagos special attack. So that seems like a move that's pretty tempting to go for. And we see that Chi-Yu does have access to that Ghost Terrestrialization, so does Aaron have the bravery to go for the fake out there, and does Justin want to go for a Ghost Terrestrialization, which would mean that, yeah, the Trapagos would be able to hit it for super effective damage.
Ooh, no Terrestrialization, so fake out, very good here into this Chi-Yu. And Terra Starstorm now in response. Chi-Yu isn't necessarily the bulkiest of Pokemon, can't go on any offense this turn, but does stick around. But again, these Calm Mind boosted Terra Starstorms are just stacking up so much more damage than what we saw in game number 2. Even the Calyrex on the switch-in was brought into just below half. It recovers thanks to Citrus Berry, but there's still so much damage.
Yeah, I think what I'm most curious about now is how are the Chi-Yu and the Miraidon trained? If Chi-Yu and Miraidon are both trained to be as fast as possible, then the Miraidon would be able to be faster than it because they both have the Choice Scarf. But if the Miraidon is supposed to be as bulky as possible, and maybe the Chi-Yu is supposed to be as fast as possible, there's still a chance. But if the Miraidon is faster than the Chi-Yu, then there's a pretty nice attack into the Chi-Yu slot, going for a Draco Meteor that will do damage into both. But yeah, we see the Snarl here that was really, really high value, as we identified earlier.
I mean, and Incineroar, maybe it stuck around for one more turn than you would like, but on just a sliver of health will be enough to take it down. But Terra Starstorm now, again, now you'll be a neutral, but
getting that Beads of Ruin is pretty important here.
Yep, and that is still, I mean, Chi-Yu is already so low, and the Calyrex, I don't think it takes another one of those.
Yeah, but I think this is where the, I was going to say the lack of protects over on Justin is going to bite, but with the Trick Room up, now everything is different. Now I don't think Aaron wants to bring in that Miraidon. It's forced to bring in that Sinistra. And it's going to be a question of, is Trapagos going to be able to withstand the attacks coming out from the Groudon in the Calyrex? Thanks to Electric Seed and also this Hospitality boost, it's looking pretty good, but again, there can always be a critical hit.
We keep putting that energy out there in the universe, and we've seen it go wrong once or twice. Really quite interesting, especially too, I mean, we've seen how much damage these Pokemon have been doing, and with the defense boost that the Trapagos has, it's been kind of scary, right? And even if you try to single target, there is always the redirection from the Sinistra if you're trying to go for something with the Groudon, so it's a tough one. Trapagos is probably good through this.
Yeah, I think based on the speed, the Calyrex will definitely be faster in Trick Room. But yeah, let's see if it'll be able to take these attacks. I think it'll have to take at least 2 Calyrex attacks. Oh, but we see the Leech Seed miss the Trapagos. This is huge.
Yeah, instead of going all the offensive with it, Leech Seed to try and make it through, but it is going to miss. The damage comes on out. Calyrex does hold on, so okay, that Snarl paying off huge. Now the Groudon, the only one from Justin's end able to actually go for an attack.
Wow.
And it is going to be the miss. It's been so accurate up until this point, but finally in the closing ends of game number 3.
Yeah, this is so funny to see all those critical hits in game 2 and the misses from the Will-O-Wisp from Aaron, because it's like, yeah, it was like kind of already over him. For him, he was happy to see that there. I think he's really happy to see the misses happening now because it's such an important moment. And yeah, we see the Glacial Lance come out, not even enough to get the Sinistra down to the Focus Sash. And yeah, no critical hits there. So let's see, maybe this Groudon will have one last time to attack, but nope, the Trapagos is going to be faster in Trick Room. And we see Aaron Trailer make it into phase 2 with this 6-0.
Congratulations to Aaron taking down game number 3 there. And I mean, Trapagos has been one of those restricted that has had varying levels of success. Sometimes it seems like these lab being that Urshifu. So eyeing up the Pokemon over on Sid's end first. I'm seeing the Zamazenta, the Calyrex, but then also the Whimsicott with getting that speed online. A Chien Pao and a Raging Bolt that have priority options, and an Urshifu as well that can always fare so well. Like, there's so much damage out here on the board that you get the speed and the damage. Well, that's just a recipe for success.
Yeah, as you pointed out, like contrary to Lewis's team, which is a little bit more control-oriented with double fake out, it's a lot more hyper offense here, and yeah, it's really again interesting to see the substitute Calyrex. I just don't feel like we've seen too many of those, especially in the regulation I. But we already saw it earlier in the day on stream, and also paired here with the Chien Pao with the Focus Sash. It's almost like a relief to see Focus Sash on the Chien Pao because you see so much Assault Vest. It's like, okay, this one can survive one hit, this one can protect. It's just such a different Pokemon, and of course, love to see Whimsicott just able to spread that Encore and the fake tears. Just such an offensively oppressive Pokemon.
And of course, just eyeing up, when I look at these mirrors with the Zamazenta and the Calyrex, notably then with the Focus Sash being on the Chien Pao, we don't have that for our Calyrex. Instead, it will be Life Orb. So you get that damage, but it does mean that you are at risk of, you know, maybe getting O-code, but at least we'll level the playing field here because Lewis is also going to go for that Life Orb damage. But again, the supporting cast is what I'm looking at. This Urshifu, it will be different than what we do get to see over on Sid's end. Instead, we go for the speed over that damage. But as you called out, ways to kind of slow things down, that Incineroar and the Rillaboom, the double fake out.
Yeah, there's a really strong defensive backbone here. You know, it's championed by the Zamazenta having that Dauntless Shield ability, and generally being such a bulky Pokemon, but having Incineroar or having a Selfless Rillaboom, it feels a little bit reminiscent of like the last round where we saw Aaron versus Justin, where it feels like the offensive team is over on Sid's end, and Lewis has a little bit more the defensive team. And you know, can the offense beat out the defense? That's what I'm curious to see. And of course, in these kind of mirror matches, it's so important to see, is the Zamazenta faster on Lewis's side or on Sid's side? Same with Calyrex Shadow Rider. It just makes such a big difference, especially with the lack of speed control over on Lewis's end. Is he going to be able to naturally be faster? Is Sid going to be forced to use Tailwind to be able to attack first?
That's always the other thing I look at too, because being able to go for that Tailwind, well, then you don't have to play the game of which Calyrex is faster, playing into those speed ties. But it does mean that you have a non-attacking option on the field to then, well, there's going to be a barrage of hits coming out from the opposing end, right? So be curious to see if he does want to prioritize that early on going into this match, or if it'll be something maybe saved for a little bit down the line. But it's time to get started here again. Both of these trainers are sitting at 5-1 and trying to make their way into phase 2 of the competition. Let's get to it. The matchup between Sid and Lewis. Starting off the match, right away it's going to be Calyrex Shadow Rider out to play next to that Rillaboom with double restricted coming out on Sid's end.
Okay, so we see the As1 activate first on Lewis's end, so that's going to be a lot of important information. At worst, it's going to be a speed tie for Lewis, and at best, it's going to mean that his Calyrex Shadow Rider is going to be able to attack first. As expected, we see the Dauntless Shield happen before the Grassy Surge, and yeah, it seems like the Calyrex is under a threat here over on Sid's end, both from a Astral Barrage from Lewis's Calyrex, as well as a very strong Wood Hammer. So yeah, not looking as threatening over on Sid's end, but the Zamazenta positioned pretty well. Really not going to take too much damage from the Rillaboom and having defensive options into the Calyrex. So to me, it's going to be, my focal is going to be on, is Sid going to attack with the Calyrex here?
Especially too, the one thing that you don't have to worry about for the mind game, at least with the Calyrex, is no wide guard option on the opposing end. Whereas, you know, Sid has that, okay, well, I do have that pressure if I think you're going to be clicking into it, right? But there's always the wide guard. Another way to be getting around a super effective hit from that would be the Terastallization. For both of these trainers, we get to see them opt into the defensive with the Dark type, and it will be Lewis that has to click it. Sid, for his defensive play, will be that wide guard. So no spread attack damage will come on out. And that means you get to go before this fake out. So now you're protected your Pokemon. Notably now, it will be that Calyrex from Sid that acts first. Not too much damage considering the board state, but now confirmation, we are speed tying. Whereas Nasty blocked Lewis. So this is gonna mean, ooh, a lot of damage on the next turn.
Yeah, it's such an interesting play from both players, because from Sid's perspective, he's thinking, okay, I know you're so inclined to fake out my Zamazenta because yeah, I'm threatening a Astral Barrage plus a Body Press, and the only way you can cover for your Calyrex to not get KO'd this turn is for you to Terastallize and fake out. So I'm going to wide guard to make sure that I get value, even though you're faking me out, and get an attack off with Calyrex, since, yeah, you don't have your Zamazenta on the field. But Lewis saying, okay, I don't think you're going to, yeah, attack into my Calyrex. It's like in a pretty vulnerable position. I'm just going to get that free nasty plot off, especially since the fake out is protecting the it from the Zamazenta. So really excellently played from both players, but it feels like Lewis is in the advantage now because the Calyrex is so well positioned, not only having that +2, but also being faster, as we saw in the speed orders.
Well, we got to see a little bit of a tie, so it is going to be a weird one. So you are kind of susceptible, but with the Terastallization, it does mean that you're not necessarily taking the most coming on out. The damage really is stacking up with that second round of hit. Psychic now, we are at +2 and eyeing up this Zamazenta.
Oh.
Okay, it is going to be holding on just a little bit of health, but that will be a body press for Sid to take the KO.
Wow. I feel like, yeah, Lewis is thinking, okay, I think a lot of Zamazenta are trained to take, you know, the +2 life orb, Astral Barrage, so I'm going to get that fake out chip and then also the Grassy Glide chip to make sure that, yeah, I'm going to get just that enough small percentage to make sure my Astral Barrage or my Psychic here KOs, but it didn't even go down to single-digit HP. It was at like 11 HP there, so this Zamazenta trained to be very, very bulky.
Yeah, and that means it's a Zamazenta that, well, sticks around, and if you think that's going to be a wide guard, well, then you got to click that Psychic. That still is, that's not the same amount of damage. But that now goes the other way as well. Sid has been stacking up these Astral Barrages, and with Rillaboom going down, Zamazenta hits the field. So now you have that pressure on both ends of things.
Yeah, and I think what makes it tricky is, as you noticed, the Calyrex are speed tying. So especially with how low the HP is on Lewis's Calyrex, it's going to be really important to see which one gets to attack first. Which one is it going to be here? Okay, wide guard from Zamazenta. We see a fist bump from Sid, and it sounds like he called that.
All right, protect for one, and it'll be Sid's outspeed. And I mean, that's a single target attack, so you do get so much damage onto that opposing Zamazenta. And okay, for protect, you're good either way.
Wow.
But that's just not really that much damage. You have to imagine, well, if it was an Astral Barrage.
Yeah, it felt like that was the impactful turn since both Calyrexes were threatened to get KO'd, but Sid saying, yeah, I know you're not going to go for the Astral Barrage with the threat of my wide guard, and it pays off in dividends. And now it's just going to be delayed one more turn. Like, in this turn, whose Calyrex is going to be able to attack first? Like, I think that could make the game. But you also have to get the wide guard versus not called correct here, too, as well. So there's just so many variables on this one turn. It's really hard to follow up. Like, you know, what is the safe play for either player? I'm not sure if it exists.
I mean, it's just getting it right, and I don't think there is necessarily a safe one about it. And that's just the pressure with the wide guards, as well as, I mean, even just the pressure of it can drastically change how your opponent plays. Now, ooh, protect coming out again. It will be the single target and into a protect.
Okay.
But body press will equalize things. So now you don't have to worry about those mind games. Zamazenta is taken down. So sure, the Calyrex from Sid end does stick around for this next turn, but now it's still at pretty low health. You no longer have your wide guard, and we're still sitting across from a +2 Calyrex, but Raging Bolt could be a good way to try and equalize that.
Yeah, this Raging Bull is positioned so well here, still being at full HP, being able to threaten a knockout onto the Calyrex before it can even attack with that Thunderclap, but also a knockout onto the Zamazenta having access to that Thunderbolt. So yeah, really, really well positioned for this Raging Bolt here. I think the pressure's a lot on Lewis to get this turn right, because if he gets it wrong and just loses the Calyrex for free, then it could be a huge momentum swing back into Sid. Whereas, yeah, if you're just passive and you protect your Calyrex and you just get your Zamazenta KO'd, that could also be bad news. So, okay, so we see the protect coming out from the Calyrex on Lewis's end. What did he do with the Zamazenta?
That's exactly it, but it does mean with the protect that Thunderclap doesn't get to do anything. So Calyrex sticks around, and for Sid, going for substitute with such low health, you don't get to see that one quite as often, but trying to stick around. But eyeing up something like that Heavy Slam from the opposing end, substitute comes on through, and it is instantly gone. You make it past the turn, but that's about it. But again, you protected last turn, you substitute. You can go for the protect next one if you want. You've now burnt the protect on the opposing end.
Right. And one thing that's important to call out is that Calyrex has exactly enough HP to survive on 1 HP after 1 more life orb tick. And Sid should know that. Lewis does not. So Lewis may make a game plan now to say, okay, worst case, I take another attack from a Calyrex, but I'm just going to trade with it because it's going to get knocked out. But it's so hard to estimate from this level of HP, is it going to be enough to KO from the life orb recoil or not? But yeah, we see this translation come out from the Raging Bolt, maybe having more confidence to be able to KO that Calyrex since it just protected and can get a Thunderclap.
Yeah, make sure you do as much as possible. Wide guard from Zamazenta again, eyeing up any Astral Barrage to make sure that is not coming on through. But Thunderclap, no attacking move from the Calyrex means that you can't do anything into that slot. It will be a single target from the Calyrex over on Sid's end though, and that means Zamazenta is taken down. 2 Pokemon remain for Lewis here, and that will be a Grimnay boost, a boost to that special attack. And as said, it was Life Orb, but you stick around, and disastrous. You get +4 now, but still so pressured by this Thunderclap, and I mean, Sid still has his other restricted.
It feels like what I was just talking about happened to Lewis there, where he was like, really shaking his head as soon as he saw the Life Orb recoil not take down the Calyrex there, because I'm sure he was thinking, okay, because I have my redirection option now, I'm surely going to be able to win if that Calyrex is not there, and I don't have to worry about a spread type attack. And now there's definitely going to be an important speed tie here. If the Calyrex gets to attack over on Lewis's side first, this Calyrex is going to be gone. Follow me going to happen. Not going to matter here since it's going to be a spread type from both ends. Who's going to attack first? Oh, it's a Calyrex on Sid's ends.
All right, we get to see Sid's activate, and I mean, that is going to be the Calyrex taking down and Ogerpon down to just a little sliver. I mean, the follow me to make sure the Thunderclap couldn't go into the Pokemon, but Raging Bolt just opting to protect instead in case things went wonky. I mean, that's huge. Only 1 Pokemon remains for Lewis. It will be a self-KO with that recoil, but now Raging Bolt, you have full health. Whimsicott comes in full health and should be able to deal with this Ogerpon quite well.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, we really understand why Lewis was counting so much on that Life Orb recoil to take out that Calyrex, because if it was just this Whimsicott and this Raging Bolt versus Ogerpon and Calyrex, like that Calyrex is going to win 100 times out of 0 because you have that redirection option, you're boosted up so much. You just can't get to the Calyrex in time because the Ogerpon is in full health. So yeah, really well played from Sid to recognize, yeah, I have 2 more attacks in me before the Life Orb takes me down, and makes that game plan executed perfectly, being helped, of course, by the speed tie going in his favor there. And this is where it gets interesting to me on the game too for both these players, because yeah, I think both players have different game plans, whether they're faster or they're the slower Calyrex. But now it's a speed tie, and it's really, really volatile based off of that. The information that we did get on the Zamazentas, though, is that the Lewis's is faster, which makes sense to me because we saw the Psychic do over half to the Zamazenta, whereas the Psychic earlier, or the +2 Psychic, didn't even kill the Zamazenta, even though there was Grassy Glide Ships. So I wonder if, yeah, Lewis is able to take that information to his advantage, at least knowing that his Zamazenta is faster.
I mean, I'm just eyeing up the Calyrex Shadow Riders, and I feel like after that first activation in the match, that Sid's Calyrex went first every time. Like, I'm starting to doubt my own eyes. Do I need glasses? Did I see what I thought I saw in that first turn? Because I feel like anything past that, because the activation doesn't really matter, anything where it actually came down to attacking, I mean, Sid had that upper hand, and that one definitely hurts, especially too when we called out, I mean, we got to see that speed, not that speed, the special attack increase, the nasty plots, etc. But it's not really going to do much if you have no way of being able to capitalize off of it. And then even those pivotal turns in those mid-match, I mean, it's the wide guard versus wide guard mind
so
game,
many
right?
Mind games.
Yeah, and it just, unfortunately for that one, it's a 50-50, you get that wrong, and those Psychics just weren't that same down, like that amount of damage that you really would have wanted to take advantage of. So really well played by both. Sometimes it's just how the cookie crumbles, and I mean, speed ties surely got to go in your favor at some point, right? And the mind games, well, you just got to get them right this time as we eye up game number 2. Again, Cali Shadow and Rillaboom to lead. Whimsicott right away from the start next to the Zamazenta.
Yeah, so this Rillaboom looking even worse than before, where it was able to threaten some damage onto the Calyrex, but now it's replaced by Whimsicott, which is another Pokemon that can resist its grass type attacks, but probably going to be using it mostly as a fake out and a pivot here, so really leaning more into its support role. Calyrex really isn't pressure to terrestrialize this turn because, yeah, this Calyrex Shadow isn't on Sid's side anymore, so he has a little bit more flexibility. Only thing to keep in mind is that if he goes for a setup move, he is threatened Encore, and if you're being threatened Encore, well, you can get through it with Terra Dark, but if you're Terra Dark, Body Press is going to do a ton of damage.
There's a lot of weird things to potentially get locked into on this turn. Behzad also included among them. It will be wide guard to make sure you go faster, but Encore instantly coming out after. That is always a big call, because if it was something else, well, I mean, it could be a little bit wonky, but now Rillaboom can't really do anything on this next turn, and sure enough, this Kylie Shadow will go into Encore, not the Encore, into the Nasty Plot. Where it gets weird with the Encore, though, is you do have the Terrestrialization, which does mean that, well, I mean, you can go ahead and send that and you can't get locked into anything.
Right. Yeah. Sid recognizing, okay, because your Rillaboom has such a bad matchup here offensively, you're just going to lean to support. I'm going to punish that with the Encore. And now you're threatening both a Tailwind Body Press into the Calyrex, but also an Encore. So, yeah, Lewis will have to protect here to make sure that it's definitely not going to be Encored or KO'd this turn. But I wonder if Sid is going to read that and try to push his advantage even further.
I mean, Rillaboom essentially forced to switch out. You're not really doing anything. And also Terrestrialization essentially forced out as well with that Dark Terra type to make sure that you just cannot get Encore locked into any sort of setup, right? Which does mean, well, I mean, anything like a Body Press down the line would do so much, but no Encore, instead Tailwind to get the speed advantage on Sid's end and calling the Terrestrialization, knowing it's so telegraphed that Lewis does not want to get locked into anything. Of course the Dark Terrestrialization comes out, right? Then Prankster doesn't do anything, but goes for the Body Press, gets it right, and already a huge Pokemon advantage in this match.
Yeah, you can see Sid smiling there, and for very good reason. I mean, if you got that wrong, right? If it was just no Terrestrialization, attacked, Nasty Plotted again, I mean, Lewis was in a perfect position. Having Follow Me at full health next to a Calyrex at full health, maybe at +4, maybe having done a bajillion damage already, but now it's completely different. Getting that read correct means that the setup was for nothing, and now Lewis only just has one restricted left, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. We still don't know the fourth Pokemon, I have to imagine, but I mean, Sid still has so much staying power on his side of the board. Terrestrialization for the Zamazenta to make sure that it is just going to be resisted damage coming out from both of the Pokemon on Lewis's end, but yet again, the Encore, the MVP of game number 2. Rillaboom, again, is locked into this Behzad on this next turn. Can't go into any other type of attacking move. And Zamazenta with that Terrestrialization is essentially that was a critical hit. That was a critical hit, man.
Yeah, this really goes to show how good Terra Dragon Zamazenta is into the Fire, Water, Grass core. Just being able to do all these attacks, and wow, you see the forfeit happen there. And that was just such an aggressive game from Sid. I mean, just calling Lewis turn after turn after turn. Like, Encore turn 1. Tailwind.
You see that Navjeet is going to have kind of that restricted pairing that has the biggest target on its back. That's the Shadow Rider Calyrex alongside that Zamazenta. I don't think that there are honestly too many surprises when you take a look at this team. This is also going to have the updated Chien-Pao with the Assault Vest, so notably having only Dark and Ice type attacks, no Sacred Sword on this one. But everything else is kind of what you would have expected to see as classic partners for the Shadow Rider Calyrex and the Zamazenta.
Yeah, totally. I think the things that maybe stick out to me most are going to be the Calyrex moveset. There's no Encore. It's actually Astral Barrage, Psychic, Pollen Puff, and so Pollen Puff gives you some additional typing coverage. People like using it on Calyrex, of course, to beat opposing Calyrexes that are Dark Terra, and people often go for Dark Terra to get around Astral Barrage and Psychic, and of course, Pollen Puff, you can heal yourself up as well. And the Amoonguss and Ogerpon on the same team is interesting just because they often provide a similar role with that redirection, but Ogerpon here crucially also running that taunt rather than, for example, a grass type attack like Power Whip. And so I think normally when people look at Cornerstone Ogerpon, they just expect a super offensive Pokemon, but you can actually make this quite bulky. So at the end of the day, double redirection and a Calyrex that has a little bit more offense thanks to that Pollen Puff as well. And as you called out, this Chien-Pao, 4 attacks, it's got that Ruination, so you can often go for something like Ruination into a Body Press, just double up and try to get a knockout.
Or Ruination is going to help some of those resistant hits from the Astral Barrage into a comfy range, and the Shadow Rider Calyrex can also clean everything up and start to get those Grim Neigh boosts. On the flip side here, you have Shane Gaffney, who's going to be using a restricted duo of Kyogre and Calyrex Ice. So a different Calyrex form on this side, but this is also not really a common restricted pairing we usually see.
Exactly, yeah. It feels like it is probably, if you are going to use, you know, Kyogre, Ice Rider is just one of the best partners for it, and we did see it top cut the World Championships, but this is kind of a new take on it, right? We've seen teams like this normally have Rillaboom and Fluttermane, for example, but this is a little bit more offensive where you've got the Tailwind potential from the Tornadus, and of course there's the Smeargle here, which is a really scary partner because it can of course go for Decorate onto either of your restricted Pokemon. Smeargle Tornadus, of course, also won very much in the previous year, and that was often with like Calyrex Shadow Rider, and so but still paired with Tornadus, you can also decorate your Tornadus, give that boost as well. So at the end of the day, the Smeargle just allows for, you know, Tornadus, Kyogre, Calyrex to do so much damage with their spread moves, and the Calyrex is interesting because it's Grass Terra Seed Bomb, which is not something we see that often.
No, I mean, usually when you see that grass icon on the team sheet, that's going to be a Leech Seed. It's going to be a more kind of supportive option there just to add to the natural bulk that the Ice Rider has. But I think the other thing that I think is important to call out here is just weather control in general is going to be easier for Shane to keep hold of. There's no weather reset on Navjeet's side, and you also have the ability to go for Rain Dance as just a manual option here on your Tornadus. So let's say you have the Urshifu in the front, then you're able to reset the rain in a different way. We are going to see the restricted pairing for Navjeet hit the field with the Zamazenta and the Shadow Rider Calyrex, but for Shane it's going to be the Kyogre next to Tornadus.
So I think one thing that's really interesting here is you have to play the mind game of Wide Guard, because Navjeet, of course, does have Wide Guard. You can see he's locking in his moves so fast. He said, I'm just going to Wide Guard, I'm going to Astro Barrage. Good luck dealing with this, because you don't have taunt in your Tornadus. You can't taunt my Wide Guard, and so Tornadus here, of course, can set up a Tailwind. Then the question is, what will Kyogre do in the subsequent turns, because it could Hydro Pump into either slot. So free Tailwind for Shane on turn 1, but Navjeet's saying, look, you just can't really deal with my team because I have Wide Guard. I'm free to just keep spamming Astro Barrage.
Yeah, now though, once the Tailwind has been set, you do at least have that speed control for the subsequent turn. I think Tornadus should hang on from this as it does. But now I think, yeah, now you just do the same thing, honestly.
You can see Navjeet, though, making his moves so quickly, going for Protect and Body Press here. I think right now Shane has the ability to switch the Tornadus out. Smeargle, I think, is actually a really interesting bring here because, of course, it's immune to the Astro Barrage. And then the question is, what do you do with Kyogre, right? Like, do you ever call out and say, look, I don't actually think you're going to click Wide Guard. Otherwise, you have to rely on Hydro Pump or Thunder. Hydro Pump into Zamazenta, of course, is quite powerful. There's not going to be a switch to a Smeargle here, so does Tornadus just click that Hurricane?
I mean, Hurricane would be a huge move to select as it is very, very powerful, and you're also going to be able to hit your mark within the rain as the Thunder is also going to bypass that accuracy check. So you have a double connect into the Zamazenta, which actually trades quite a bit of damage for the Kyogre's HP.
Yeah, and Thunder, they're hoping to maybe see the Water Terra come out from Navjeet's end, but Navjeet does not go for it and ends up probably getting the best trade-off where it's like you don't want to see a Hydro Pump or a Water Spout that turn, and it does end up being the Thunder. So it's been a really fast-paced game so far. Calyrex now making the pivot, so looking to stall out a turn of Tailwind here. The Hurricane actually is a big deal because Bleak Wind Storm, of course, would just feel really bad into potential Wide Guard, and so it's consistent damage here. Raging Bolt, really good switch in to resist all the damage here.
And it's kind of amazing that Navjeet's able to keep that Focus Sash intact on that Shadow Rider Calyrex for once that Tailwind ends up expiring. A passive turn here, as it is going to be the Zamazenta that protects itself, but Shane stays one step ahead. Throws that Hurricane into the Raging Bolt as well as the Hydro Pump inside the rain. It brings that Raging Bolt quote down quite low.
Oh, this has been fun to watch because Shane has gotten the protects right both times, but is still in kind of a tricky position because, as you can see now, the Raging Bolt is applying pressure with that Thunderclap, right? And so if you're Shane now, you of course have the Grass Terra, but you really want to Grass Terra Kyogre. Its HP is quite low. Could protect it and let Tornadus get an attack off, but Shane's been doing a great job with these double ups, even with the resistances. You can see how much damage a Kyogre in rain with Mystic Water can do.
I think you might want to save it because when you're thinking about what could happen towards the end of this game, let's say Shane actually has this Ice Rider Calyrex in the back. You know that Shadow Rider Calyrex come out at any moment, so you might want to preserve the terrestrialization for that. And I think at this point, Kyogre's actually done quite a lot of work so far to whittle away at the HP bars of these two very tanky Pokemon with the Zamazenta and the Raging Bolt. So as you see here, Shane does just let the Kyogre go down as Hurricane just barely misses the KO onto the Zamazenta, but the Tornado survives as well? What?
Wow, okay, a bunch of survivals here. It does give Shane the ability to set up another Tailwind. Urshifu comes in now. This is going to be Ghost Terra with Life Orb, and so you can go for Ghost Terra and not become weak to the electric type damage. And then the other debate here is, do you want to click Thunderclap? Because if you do click Thunderclap, Shane can just go for Aqua Jet, and Aqua Jet gets around the priority of Thunderclap, right? So Thunderclap would fail. So big survival there. Tornadus now can set up a Tailwind. I am curious what Shane's final Pokemon is because I feel like Navjeet just still has a lot of offense and Raging Bolt exerts so much pressure against everything. We saw Navjeet hover that final Pokemon as well. It's going to be Amoonguss. Amoonguss obviously a really good Pokemon for the Urshifu, but you're going to want to knock out that Tornadus first before bringing it out on the field.
Yeah, at least you do have the Rocky Helmet to play with. So if that Urshifu does get those Surging Strikes into that Pokemon, you're going to be doing quite a bit of recoil damage back. But first and foremost, it's going to be a Terrestrialization for this Urshifu, turning it into a Ghost type as the Tornado sets up a second Tailwind. The Surging Strikes, though, is going to be the call as Navjeet does not hit Thunderclap. That's going to be a KO for this Urshifu, and that's a sad Raging Bolt on the other side.
Yeah, for Raging Bolt to have fainted to a combination of non-resistant attacks, or resistant attacks was absolutely wild, right? Hydro Pump, Hurricane, Surging Strikes, you don't see that every day.
Yeah, and now that, and the Behemoth Bash too, it doesn't feel so great. I mean, this Urshifu is going to have taken a bit of recoil there from the Life Orb as well. But, I mean, now that their reign is expired, this is where that Tornadus can come in and set it back up.
Yeah, these players are playing really aggressively. It's been really fun to watch. Right? Navjeet did go for a Behemoth Bash into an Urshifu, which would resist it, calling out the Ghost Terra specifically. And also went for a Thunderbolt there to hedge in case that, you know, for example, for some reason you ignore the Raging Bolt and you target the Zamazenta, so just getting guaranteed damage. But really nice call there to actually chunk away at the Urshifu pretty significantly. So what's interesting now is like Amoonguss obviously is exerting redirection pressure. Maybe doesn't want to eat up a Hurricane though, but the question is, like, I would expect Amoonguss to even survive a Hurricane. And then Urshifu just does really poorly into Amoonguss right now, right? So my question is, what is Shane's final Pokemon? Because of course a Calyrex Ice Rider can be okay in terms of damage output, but it has to worry consistently about Wide Guard, just completely walling it. So I can't stress how important it is that Navjeet has Zamazenta with Wide Guard. It's been on this field the whole time.
And that Urshifu is going to be preserved, so we get the answer to that question. It's going to be the Ice Rider Calyrex. And with this moveset, you know, you're not going to be able to Terrestrialize it anymore, so you can't get that extra boost to that Seed Bomb damage, and you only have Glacial Lance as the other attacking option. For now, the Amoonguss is going to protect itself as Tornadus tried to go for the Hurricane, but it is going to fail with that Protect onto the Amoonguss, leaving the Zamazenta to go for something else. As the Behemoth Bash is unleashed, Calyrex is going to take that super effective hit, bringing it to below half HP.
Yeah, that was a huge turn, I think, because had Shane gotten the knockout onto the Zamazenta with Hurricane, there's now no more Wide Guard support. Calyrex comes out, the Amoonguss just protected, so you could double up onto it. I think Navjeet's in a really commanding position now, and this Zamazenta, normally you expect it to do a lot of damage with Body Press, but it is the Behemoth Bash is doing over 50% to Ghost Urshifu as well as this Calyrex, so it's going to be a Fire Terra here, the perfect defensive Terra at the moment because there's no Urshifu on the field.
Yeah, and I think it would always struggle anyway because you have that Shadow Warrior Calyrex. It's going to be dealing super effective damage. The Hurricane does hit without the rain present on the field, but it doesn't bring that Amoonguss down to even below half. As Behemoth Bash comes out into the Ice Rider Calyrex, there's nothing to be able to save it, as Shane has no choice except to bring this Urshifu back in as the Tornadus gets put to sleep with the Spore.
Yeah, and I think Navjeet just really nice control of this one. The Wide Guard pressure from Zamazenta just stopping Shane's best attacks makes this so much tougher. So Urshifu hits the field now, and of course it can't go for a Surging Strikes, but if you go for Surging Strikes, you are just going to end up taking so much damage from recoil, right, from the Rocky Helmet. So Navjeet, you can see how confident he is in his game plans. He's been locking his moves in like under 5 seconds, and I'm like, we don't even have enough time to process how quickly he's making these moves. So really, really masterful game plan. I think Shane honestly has played really nicely as well, but this matchup does not feel amazing for him because the whole point of a team using Kyogre and Ice Rider is to get to spam Water Spout and Glacial Lance, and when you're staring down the threat of Wide Guard, it's that much harder to do so. And so Zamazenta hanging on with just a sliver of HP was huge in this game. I think, you know, Shane might want to prioritize knocking out Zamazenta a little bit sooner in game 2.
That way you just remove that threat completely as the Surging Strikes. He's going to go for it anyway. I mean, it's only going to take 2, actually, to get the knockout here, but you still have to worry about the threat of that Shadow Warrior Calyrex coming back in to take this Amoonguss' place. So while the Urshifu doesn't get knocked out by the Rocky Helmet recoil, or maybe even the Life Orb recoil, I think we know where this one's going to go. So when thinking about game number 2, you're already mentioning, let's get the Zamazenta out of here faster. It cannot stay on the field. We had seen Shane do an amazing job of being able to read through the protects that Navjeet was going to go for to at least get that damage down. And I think ultimately that turn 1 where you've got the Thunder and the Hurricane as the double up into the Zamazenta, and it didn't get knocked out.
Exactly.
You have to wonder, well, should I maybe have selected different options there?
100%, right? It could have been... Water Spout's really risky there, right? Because, like, you've already seen Wide Guard and willingness to click it, so, like, Hydro Pump kind of would have been the option to say, look, if you Terra, at least force your Terra out. If you don't Terra, Zamazenta just faints there should it hit, right?
Yeah.
I do think the other scary thing here for Shane is it's like, if you're clicking Hydro Pump, that is not an accurate move, and similarly, Hurricane outside of Rain, also not accurate, but I think you kind of maybe have to go for calls like that. So what will be interesting is both players run it back, right? Navjeet can just say, you know what, I am just going to play it safe and, you know, go for the Terra this time around. But I think forcing the Terra out would not have been bad, right? Because then it takes the way for Navjeet to have defensive Terras like the one we saw on Amoonguss in the end game. And so, yeah, I think you can go with the same Pokemon and just play a little bit differently. You can also, like, I was thinking Smeargle could be an interesting Pokemon to pick in this matchup because it pressures with a Spore. And if you're able to Spore Zamazenta, for example, then you're able to try to Water Spout everything. I think Shane might not feel confident leading that, though, because into Calyrex plus Zamazenta, like, both of those Pokemon are just faster than Smeargle. You can double up onto Smeargle for a knockout. So it's exactly as you called, Riz. I think turn 2 of this game was the, like, huge, not the singles it's a turn that decided the game, but it would have played so differently had that just been Hydro Pump in his Zamazenta.
Well, because you saw how much that Hydro Pump did to the Raging Bull when it switched in, you're like, what? Imagine if that was the Zamazenta on the other side instead. And yeah, I think knowing that amount of damage, I think Shane can also be a little more confident going into the second game, whether or not he wants to actually click the inaccurate move option, but it's also the final round of the day, so maybe you're thinking too, okay, well, I'm already 7-0. Now I really got to be thinking about, like, how do I stay mentally prepped and focused for tomorrow as well? Because you still have phase 2 ahead of you. Yeah, it's still a game ahead of you, right? Like, this winning one, even if you're down, one game here is so big. And so from Shane's end, I think, yeah, once again, it's like prioritization of knocking out Zamazenta. For Navjeet, I think it's like Raging Bolt's actually a really good Pokemon, but got knocked out pretty quickly in that last one, right? It, like, took a Hydro Pump, it took a Hurricane, and then it took a Surging Strikes. And so given that Shane didn't bring Calyrex Ice Rider all the way until the end game of that previous one, I think like a Raging Bolt adaptation could work if you're Navjeet and you say, look, I don't want to run it back because I got the guessing game right that one turn, but like it's really scary if I get it wrong because I could lose Zamazenta. But I think, you know, Navjeet just has a lot of tools here, and for Shane, it's really about how quickly can you actually knock out that Zamazenta. It's so hard because I think when you look at it, you do have to kind of rely on the rain boosted options. When you look at the Ice Rider, I mean, sometimes we even see something like a high horsepower on this Pokemon, which would be able to do super effective damage into the Zamazenta. But that, it just isn't an option when looking at this team because you only have Glacial Lance and Seed Bomb. And Seed Bomb isn't gonna do a whole lot, so unless you force the Terra, I guess, but... I'm really glad you called that out because I actually think if I'm in Shane's shoes, I consider dropping Calyrex outright and bringing Amoonguss or Smeargle instead because it's exactly like you said. And okay, well, it's gonna be it's Smeargle and Calyrex, so different story here. Ooh, but it catches the Raging Bolt and Zamazenta on the other side. It does get the Raging Bolt. I think this is gonna get really interesting because Wide Guard obviously can perpetually just stop those Glacial Lances, but then Smeargle can just start sporing things, right? So yeah, I think, you know, not the adaptation I would have expected, but actually feels like it could be quite strong here. The main question is, can Smeargle get a Spore off at some point into the Zamazenta? You can see here, Navjeet's like, look, I just want to KO your Smeargle. Let me just get rid of this immediately. So then the question is, you know, Raging Bolt potentially fast enough to outspeed Smeargle? Because if not, then of course the Smeargle, if it gets a Spore off here, would be absolutely huge, right? Let's say you Spore the Zamazenta. That's when we have really slowing down that Wide Guard pressure. Yeah, and then you might feel forced to have to use that terrestrialization so much earlier. And even just with the Calyrex Ice on the field, you're going to use it anyway, actually, if you're Shane. Because I think you do worry a little bit about taking a Behemoth Bash if you are this Ice Rider, since you saw how much damage it took on the first game. And so that's going to be a Grass-type Terra. Smeargle's just going to go for a Fake Out here, so there isn't going to be a double up of damage into the Smeargle for now. But you are going to see this Raging Bolt move with the Thunderbolt to bring that Smeargle all the way down to its Focus Sash already. But what did this Ice Rider do? Oh! We'll see how much that one ends up mattering. If it ends up being a speed boost on Smeargle from the Moody, makes things interesting. But it is just the Glacial Lance there, and it almost gets the knockout outright onto this Raging Bolt. Almost gets it, doesn't... Oh, and it was the Smeargle! No! You can see Shane tilting his head a little bit. Had that not got him paralyzed, then it would pressure Spore immediately onto either slot this next turn. Yeah, and so
I don't know. I like the thing about Calyrex is it's still just in such an awkward spot, but of course you can go for Seed Bomb now onto the Raging Bolt to knock it out instead of playing around Wide Guard, right? So it's gonna be the pivot. It's gonna be okay. Amoonguss coming in. I like that adaptation, and no Wide Guard here, just the body press, but a good switch in to now get some recoil from the Rocky Helmet.
So then what exactly did Shane end up doing with this Ice Rider? Because if it's just another Glacial Lance, I mean, that's a KO onto the Raging Bolt, but it's just going to be the Trick Room to set this Amoonguss up for success.
And I like that. I think if you get the knockout on a Raging Bolt, you just give Na'Vi a free switch in, but now that you've set up Trick Room, these Pokemon are kind of in an awkward position. Like, I think Shane going Smeargle and Amoonguss is really smart here because now you have double Spore pressure. And once again, if you're able to put the Zamazenta to sleep, that's a really big deal, right? So I think Shane's approach is basically, look, I know you have Wide Guard, but eventually I'll get a Spore off into you. Once I get that Spore off, then I can start spamming Glacial Lance.
For now, a Protect onto the Zamazenta is going to keep it safe as Raging Bolt goes for the Thunderclap. That Grass Terra going to help keep this Ice Rider nice and safe as Amoonguss goes for Pollen Puff. And all of a sudden, all the damage that you did on those first couple of turns is completely undone. The Grass Terra boosted Seed Bomb from the Calyrex is going to finish off this Raging Bolt. We're in for a fun game, Aaron.
We are. I mean, I'm really impressed by how Shane's maneuvering this because I was like, on paper, Grass, like Terra, Calyrex with Seed Bomb, Glacial Land seems like really abysmal here. Still has to get through what's coming out in the back. Calyrex comes out. I think Shane's done an amazing job calling out Na'Vi on these protects, but the question is it enough, right? I do think getting that Pollen Puff was a huge deal because now the Calyrex is just healthy enough. So with Calyrex and Zamazenta out from Na'Vi, neither of these are Grass Terra, so you are vulnerable to a Spore immediately here. That healing's so big, and so you can see Na'Vi's hoping to bait out a Spore onto that Calyrex and just immediately hard switch into Amoonguss. Then the Amoonguss can apply pressure with Sludge Bomb in the next turn.
Yeah, and you also see the Zamazenta trying to protect this partner just a little bit because you don't want it taking super effective Glacial Lance damage on the way in either. So that's going to be why this Zamazenta has selected Wide Guard. As Amoonguss just decides, okay, well, I might not want to try to risk sporing the Calyrex, but I know you just protected your Zamazenta, so I'm going to spore that slot instead. As the Glacial Lance fails, that's okay on this turn because Shane got away with a huge turn being able to put that Zamazenta to sleep.
Yeah, I think the last couple turns have been amazing from Shane's end, right? Like getting that Trick Room up and then adjusting and bringing Amoonguss as well. And I think this is like exactly the way that you need to handle this matchup. It's just so impressive because I think it's not like the easiest line to really see. And I was talking about like, hey, maybe you drop Calyrex Ice Rider and bring in like the Amoonguss instead and support Kyogre, but instead it's Ice Rider actually doing the heavy lifting right now.
I actually kind of wonder if, in fact, it was the Kyogre that got benched since we haven't seen that fourth Pokemon yet. Smeargle is going to come back in for the Amoonguss as Zamazenta takes its first turn of sleep, and Calyrex is going to undo the Trick Room.
Interesting.
Ooh.
So, I mean, you can now go for you know, potential Decorate onto your own Calyrex Ice Rider here. The question is, can Zamazenta wake up this turn? If it does, you get that Wide Guard off. It's okay, hovering between Wide Guard and looks like actually trying to just knock out the Ice Rider right now. And I mean, I think the scary thing here is that for Shane is that your offense is pretty heavily coming from this Ice Rider, right? And so it's not necessarily doing like that much damage either. You still have to like play through Wide Guards as well. And so it's like you have to get so many turns right. It's gotten a lot so far, so it's going to start off with the Fire Terror. This Amoonguss now is like just so difficult to deal with, right? So, of course, does open vulnerability to getting spored from the opposing end now, so let's see what plays out. And wow, Zama does wake up!
Okay, so Zamazenta just gets to go for the body press here, which is going to chunk this Calyrex down quite well as the Decorate now lands into this Ice Rider Calyrex. So you get this nice, juicy attack boost that's going to help out a lot with those physical attacks, but Amoonguss actually gets to move first. Sludge Bomb, luckily, isn't going to actually take out this Calyrex as Shadis goes for another Trick Room.
Okay, I mean, I like the gamble there.
I like it. I mean, you're resetting the Trick Room, like essentially undoing it, and then like now you've got 5 extra, like, you know?
Yeah, and you baited out the Terror from Amoonguss, so now if you're Shane, I think what in play you can go for is just protect Calyrex, switch your Amoonguss in for Smeargle, and then angle for a side Pollen Puff to try to heal the Calyrex back up. The awkward thing is Zamazenta and Amoonguss will resist both Glacial Lance and Seed Bomb, right? And so it's like such a tough dance to maneuver through right now, but really clever plays here so far. So Navjeet looking to just protect his Pokemon this turn. Does Shane pivot out? It is going to be Smeargle swapping out. I expect Amoonguss to come back in right now. Could be that Kyogre as well, but yeah, it's going to be Amoonguss, and I think the game plan here is to try to get another Pollen Puff off right now.
They'll protect from Navjeet to Amoonguss first, because you do have a couple of turns of Trick Room to get through now, as yeah, we see that Calyrex also follows suit with a protect. But it's just so funny, because like you expect the circle of protects to go around, but then yeah, I mean, hopefully Shane's Amoonguss is in a good enough position that you can get the Pollen Puff off, but it's just going to be a Rage Powder here to try to draw away the attention.
Yeah, and of course the Amoonguss now fire typing does not get to ignore that, so says, look, I don't want to play around a potential speed high, and Glacial Lance here, I mean, that's actually a lot of damage for something that's resisting.
Yep. That's a +3 Glacial Lance there from the Decorate, as well as the Chilling Nade boost that it got from knocking out that Raging Bull at the beginning of the second game. 2 turns left to play with. I mean, this is kind of a critical point. Shane has to get these wide guard calls correct.
Yeah, exactly. This is such a fun game, honestly, because like, it is such a creative solution to the problem that Shane was facing, right? And
yeah.
to have brought this, to have gotten a Decorate, okay, Amoonguss is going to start the turn off with a Protect. Calyrex actually protects on the opposing end as well. Okay, so this does give Amoonguss on Shane's end the opportunity to Spore either slot, right? But it's just going to be Protects all around, trying to stall out that Trick Room a little bit. Does bait out the Protect. So Spore now goes into the opposing Amoonguss. Yeah, the main question I had here was like, how fast are the Amoonguss relative to each other? Because like Shane went for the Rage Powder, right? Could have gone for a Spore, could have gone for Pollen Puff as well. But it feels really bad if you Pollen Puff and you just end up being slower than the opposing Amoonguss and it just Sludge Bombs your Calyrex for a knockout.
There's still another turn of Trick Room to get through, so you are going to have to play around that. But Shane is actually just going to remove the Ice Rider completely and bring the Smeargle back in. Wow.
Okay, not what I was expecting, but baits out the wide guard, saying, look, I don't want to play the wide guard mind game. It opens the door for Amoonguss, and it's a wide guard Rage Powder as well, so super defensive play, right?
But it kind of works out here, because Shane gets the Spore into the Zamazenta now, and Smeargle gets to come back in, and now you have 2 Spore users on the field.
Oh my goodness. This
As the Trick Room expires!
Oh my, this has been a fascinating game to watch, right? I think like Shane's gotten a lot of damage on the board, but Calyrex is still kind of waiting to just come in and start dishing out damage to everything. So let's see. This Amoonguss having gone for that Fire Terra, I think was really big for Shane to like bait out that Terra, because now it is open to getting Spored, for example. And yeah, the switch there, maybe hoping to like bait out a knockout onto that slot to give you a free switch in back in. Zamazenta now finally pivots, but there is a full HP Calyrex Shadow Rider in the back waiting to just kind of sweep this game. So let's see what happens.
Well, it's got the Focus Sash intact, but my worry here is the fact that you do have 2 Spore users on the other side. Maybe you just decided, oh, well, Zamazenta could actually switch out, so I could Spore either slot. But it is just going to be the switch back in of this Grass-type Ice Rider Calyrex, and then we'll see what this Amoonguss has gone for. Wow, it's just a Protect, but,
we see so many Protects over. That means the opposing Amoonguss can Spore a Pollen Puff right now. Is it either?
Oh,
it is!
Oh my gosh!
Huge healing here into Calyrex.
Wow, I mean, Shane has just gotten so many turns correct in a row that now like this Ice Rider Calyrex just feels like it's going to be really hard to get through.
Yeah, the main thing is like now the Calyrex, you know, doesn't have its boosts anymore, so the Amoonguss on Navjeet's side will survive an attack. So like, I don't know, it still feels kind of tricky, and Shane, of course, still crucially has one last Pokemon as well. I feel like if it is a Kyogre in the back, that can actually be really strong now that you baited out the Fire Terror from Amoonguss, right? So I feel like Shane's game plan right now is to just whittle everything away so that Kyogre can come in. The other tough thing for Kyogre here is that it doesn't have Origin Pulse. It only has Water Spout for that spread move, right? So I think one thing you want to be wary of is letting Navjeet's Calyrex get too many special attack boosts from its ability, because should it get like stack up a bunch, then suddenly that Astral Barrage just does so much more damage. And it's Rage Powder here to try to bypass something like a Pollen Puff, just protecting the Calyrex, but not from an Astral Barrage.
Astral Barrage will connect into both, and the Amoonguss actually survives that hit, which is just incredible. That means it's going to redirect away the Sludge Bomb from the opposing Amoonguss. Does get knocked out, but now that's going to leave the Calyrex free to go for a Trick Room here.
Trick Room, but what is coming in, right? Because let's say you bring the Kyogre out, you'll get spored probably from the opposing Amoonguss. And so it is Smeargle still from Shane's end. This Smeargle has lasted in this battle for so much longer than I would have ever guessed.
Like, I'm so old. Get me out of here. Oh my gosh. I mean, but it's really like, even though I got paralyzed on the first turn of this game, like it's actually provided so much value just like as an accessory piece to put back in. But we're even active bait right now as we do finally get to see the 4th Pokemon here.
There's
it's going to be Kyogre.
So Kyogre, I mean, kind of a dream position for it as long as it does not get spored, right? So now you've got double the amount of offense out on the field. Does bait out the Protect from the Amoonguss here. And Calyrex will protect as well, so Navjeet wanting to stall out Trick Room once again, but Kyogre now, you know, threatening with a lot of damage. The thing is, Amoonguss can spore the Kyogre slot. Kyogre could choose to protect as Calyrex goes for like Glacial Lance, for example. You also could just attack with both of your Pokemon this turn if you're Shane, or even switch Calyrex out in a Smeargle and go for an attack, and so see which option decides he wants to lock in the most. But Kyogre, it feels so close, right? But because the Trick Room got set up, now it's just, yeah, vulnerable to Spore. So I feel like what Shane ideally wants to do is get that Smeargle out so that it can redirect that Spore away. But it's a swap out once again.
Wow, I mean, Shane's just trying to have to play with his own Trick Room and try to figure out a way to get this Kyogre into the right position. And it is going to actually eat the Spore here. As Glacial Lance now comes out from this Ice Rider Calyrex, it does a lot to that Shadow Rider, but doesn't get the KO onto the Amoonguss quite yet. And Smeargle's also going to be able to get past this Astro Barrage because of its normal typing.
Oh my goodness!
That's incredible! What? The Ice Rider survives that?
I feel like everything on Shane's end has survived on like 1 HP. This game is absolutely nuts, Rose. And I mean, I feel like Shane's done everything's so low, right? Like you're so close to just clicking the water spout button a couple of times. I think it's like Shane actually doesn't mind Trick Room ending at this point. Once again, you just want to be careful because if this Calyrex gets like a boost or two, it can be really scary. But oh my goodness, this has been such a close game.
It really has. And the fact that the Smeargle actually is now freshly on the field, you could go for like a fake out here if you wanted to into the Amoonguss. Knocks yourself out, gets your Kyogre back in for free.
Yep.
But it is going to be the Zamazenta that's going to come in and take that Amoonguss's place. Now there's a little bit more HP to play around with for this Amoonguss, but how much is that really going to help you versus this Kyogre that is ready to water spout to victory? As the Glacial Lance is going to come out, following up the fake out from the Smeargle. This poor Zamazenta has just had a time in this game. I don't even think that it's taken its first mandatory turn of sleep yet.
It hasn't, yeah.
So it comes in and has to take that Glacial Lance. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Shane should be in a good spot right now, right? He's like gotten all the damage he's needed to try to put all of these in KO range from Water Spout. It's just about getting Kyogre out back on the field. I mean, this is honestly one of the most complex games I've seen in this regulation, and like Shane's game plan has been absolutely wild. It has been super fun to see, and of course Navjeet's doing a really great job trying to respond to it, but Smeargle gets paralyzed here.
Ooh,
okay.
I maybe was thinking he might have wanted to go for like a Decorate into this Ice Rider and just kind of ensure the KO, but it is going to be a Glacial Lance to get that at the end of the day into the Zamazenta. The threat of Wide Guard is down. This Ice Rider now does get a +1 to its attack boost since it shed the other boost that it got. But this Amoonguss is coming back in now with a little bit more HP to play with, and I think that's where Decorate could have been really important.
Yeah, let's see. I mean, the key thing here is like Calyrex now can angle for a knockout onto either slot. You can Astro Barrage. And the question I have is this, like, how fast is Amoonguss relative to Smeargle with the paralysis? Because, like, I think Smeargle could still be faster. Because right now, if you're Navjeet, you can angle for a double knockout. Just Astro Barrage Sludge Bomb as he's opting to go for. So, okay, here it is. Astro Barrage should get the knockout here onto the Ice Rider.
But that's going to give up a Grim Neigh boost over to this Shadow Rider Calyrex, and so I worry a little bit about this Kyogre having to come back in and take a boosted Astral Barrage before it gets a chance to move. As we do see that happen first, we will now find out the speed orders, but Smeargle is going to get the Spore off before it gets knocked out to a Sludge Bomb.
What a game this was. I mean, if you told me the solution to this matchup was leading Calyrex Ice Rider with Grass Terra into with Glacial Lance Seed Bomb, no high horsepower into Navjeet's team, And for Shane to have pulled out the victory, I mean, this is truly one of the most incredible games I've seen in this format.
I mean, it's perfect timing too. Rain expires,
Yep,
Kyogre comes back
exactly.
in. It just all feels so calculated.
It does, yeah, and I mean, wow. I mean, I'm blown away, honestly. Like, what a game this was, because game one with just, like, it felt like even with so many good calls on Shane's end, the Zamazenta sticking around for so long just was able to shut him down. And so I'm so excited to see how this third game plays out, because once again, on paper, like, that's just nuts. It's Calyrex Ice Rider with into this Zamazenta. And I think one really big thing was Navji, you know, tried to make an adjustment, brought Raging Bolt, saying, look, I think Raging Bolt is really good. I didn't use it super effectively in the first game. But Shane, by leading that Calyrex, it was actually a stronger option, right? Because it was able to just pressure immediately. And I think Shane was saying, look, by leading Smeargle, I at least put on pressure with potential Spore immediately. And so, I mean, it just, everything on his team felt like it hung out with 1 HP.
Yeah.
The Amoonguss, the Calyrex Ice Rider, it was just absolutely nuts.
And then the Pollen Puff to make sure that this Ice Rider Calyrex is going to be super healthy for the back half of the game. It was just so well planned out and thought out that this game 3 feels like it's going to be an epic payoff for one of these competitors. You've already worked so hard throughout the day to have an undefeated record. Now you just need one more game to secure it for the end of day 1.
Absolutely. I think basically if I'm Navji, what I learned from that last game was double Spore pressure is really scary, because if you get that Spore off at any given point, you can shut me down. So the adjustment you can make in his shoes is considering bringing that taunt Ogerpon. Ogerpon not only gives you the redirection for Spore with Follow Me, but also gives you Taunt, which can shut down Smeargle, Amoonguss, right, from going for those Spores. And so I think that could be an interesting adjustment. You could also run it back like game 1 and just not lead the Raging Bolt and go Calyrex Zamazenta instead. That can feel a little bit awkward, but at the end of the day, like, I think, yeah, Raging Bolt is a lead. Tried to just, like, respond to Shane's lead in game 1 and did not end up working out super well. So then I'm wondering if you're on Shane's end and if you anticipate the Ogerpon adjustment, for example, like, you could theoretically go with something like Tornadus Urshifu.
Like, go back to your game 1 leads
yeah,
either.
exactly. Yeah, Tornadus Kyogre, and the Kyogre has that Grass Terror. I mean, this Ogerpon doesn't even have a Grass type attack, right? So it can't threaten Kyogre for a ton of damage. So let's see how both players respond as we get into game 3.
What a great way to end our day here for day 1 as the Kyogre, the Tornadoes hit the field, and it's alongside and across from the Shadow Rider Calyrex and Cornerstone Ogerpon.
This is why I love watching VGC, like seeing players adjust, and then I feel like Shane has gotten the better lead in games 2 and 3 here. So Ogerpon, yeah, being led immediately. What this means is at least on turn 1, Kyogre has a pretty free, like Tornadus can Tailwind, Kyogre can just Water Spout immediately, right? Now, Navji does basically have a Focus Sash effectively on both of these Pokemon because of the Sturdy, and so even if you go for Tail and Water Spout, both Pokemon will survive on 1 HP, but is that trade worth it, right? Of course, then you're eating up so much damage, and you can do a lot of damage in return, but I don't even think an Ivy Cudgel plus Astro Broch knocks out Kyogre, which is what makes this so tough. So the lack of a Grass-type attack here actually really punishing on Ogerpon.
And it's tough, too, because you looked and saw Navji thinking about a passive play. What if I just protect here? But that gets so heavily punished by Shane just setting up that Tailwind and getting an additional turn to have that speed on the Kyogre, and then all of a sudden, your Tornadus is now free to attack on the subsequent turn. So it's really risky. Kyogre's just going to Terrestrialize on this first turn, and I am expecting a lot of damage to get traded from either side. Astro Barrage first here from Navji is going to chunk this Kyogre down to about 50% as the Ivy Cudgel actually does follow up onto the Tornadus. Since we didn't see a Tailwind, Tornadus was going for an attack here.
Yeah, no Tailwind, and I think maybe hoping like be faster than the Ogerpon, or like calling out maybe one Pokemon's gonna protect, but it ends up actually being a lot worse, right, than how it looked on turn 1. And I don't know if the Kyogre honestly needed to go for the Grass Terra there, because there's no Grass type attack from Ogerpon. It is just that Ivy Cudgel, and so now you open up a weakness to Pollen Puff as well. So I feel like it could have just been the turn 1 Tailwind plus Water Spout with no Terra, would have brought both of these Pokemon down to 1 HP, and then this next turn you would have still pressure with Water Spout, but now Shane's lost the Terra. Once again, I just don't think it really, added any value.
And this is really hard too, because you now don't have Terrestrialization for your Ice Rider Calyrex. So this Astro Barrage is about to hurt a lot. You already saw how much damage just a base Astro Barrage is going to do, about 50% to this Kyogre. So Shane knows, I gotta get this Kyogre out of here. It could just get knocked out on this turn, especially because Navji still has Terrestrialization available, and that's gonna be a Ghost type over to the Shadow Rider to give additional stats to this Astro Barrage.
Yeah, it's gonna do so much damage here, and with the lack of Tailwind, Navji just is able to, have such good control of the speed. And I mean, yeah, Calyrex protects now, right? But Astro Barrage is going to do so much damage into Amoonguss, and then the next turn you just pressure Ivy Cudgel plus Astro Barrage into the Calyrex slot. So, you know, it's not it's quite uncommon for Ogre Punk Cornerstone to run that grass type attack, and so I think Shane was probably just expecting a grass type attack. But look how much damage it does to Amoonguss, right? Even gets the double up here. It doesn't get the knockout. Once a hit gun, hangs out with the sliver, but now you just Ivy Cudgel and Astro Barrage again. And yeah, it just feels like Shane had the lead here, but needed to click that Tailwind button and not Grass Terror with Kyogre. And Amoonguss protects here, but Calyrex just gets the run away with this game, it feels like.
Yeah, because at this point, you are going to get the Astral Barrage into the Ice Rider, which is going to do a lot here. And maybe your hope if you're Shane is that you actually do catch the Overpawn trying to go for an Ivy Cudgel. Like the targeting is a little bit off. So that Calyrex can actually set up the Trick Room, but it almost gets knocked out in one hit as the Ivy Cudgel is going to go after this Ice Rider. So no Trick Room here for Shane. Very little HP left on the Amoonguss and a Kyogre that's going to come in at a speed disadvantage against both of these Pokemon.
Yeah, and I mean, Astro Barrage, I think we'll just finish it off here, right, with Ivy Cudgel. I think like the lack of Tailwind was just, it just put Shane in, I think, an immediately losing position. And so Navjeet's gonna go 8-0. And I think one thing you have to consider in a match like this,